Chapter 1511, God of Tianhuang Mainland. Chapter 1511, God of Tianhuang Mainland. Fufu. With a relaxed expression, the Tao Tai looked at the Kunlun race beings guarding the entrance of the valley and shook his head with a smile. What are you guys still holding on for? That beast is merely struggling to survive and won't be able to hold on for long. Tao Tai. A half-martial ancestor leading these Kunlun clansmen shouted and dragged his injured body forward, saying sternly, "How dare you? The master's corpses are right here and yet you dare to point your saber and weapon at my young master. You even dare to call him a beast. Are you truly not afraid of divine retribution? Our master's spirits are in heaven. If they sense this, they will be able to kill you here even with a wisp of their souls." In the valley not far away, two demon beast corpses 1,000 feet tall stood upright. One of them had golden bones while the other had purple ones. They were the two divine house back then. The two divine house stood side by side with their backs facing Tianhuang Mainland as they gazed in the direction of the Rainbow Cave. Although they were only two corpses, they still emitted a shuddering aura. The Tao Tai frowned slightly. The two divine house died countless years ago and there was no way they would have any remnant souls remaining. The saying of divine retribution made him scoff even further. However, he was still wary. In the past, the two divine house were way too notorious. Furthermore, his ancestors were the underlings of the two divine house. In his bloodline, he possessed an innate fear towards the divine Ho race. This time round, if he had not joined forces with the god race, he would not have dared to challenge the divine Ho race either. Humph. The Tao Tai sneered, the Kunlun clansmen on the other side, listen up. I can offer you a chance. If you submit and bow down to me now, I can let you off and treat everyone equally in the future. If you refuse to submit, I'll treat you guys as traitors and kill you without mercy. Ha 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 ha. Opposite, the Kunlun half-martial ancestor roared in laughter with a sorrowful expression. Traitors? What a joke and immense irony. The young master is a divine Ho and is the true Kunlun lord. Even your ancestors were the underlings of my masters. How dare you boast brazenly now and attempt to kill your master? Tao Tai, you're the real traitor. Han Quan, you're truly stubborn. The Tao Tai sneered, so many years have passed and you're still hung up over the past? Let me tell you, I'm the true Kunlun lord. How dare this lad fight against me? Half-martial ancestor Han Quan sneered as well. Tao Tai, no matter how many years have passed, our clansmen will remember the teachings of the masters. Even if they had to die in battle, our masters refused to let the god race step foot into Tianhuang Mainland. Yet, what did you do? What are you guys doing? There were only hundreds of thousands Kunlun clansmen on the side of half-martial ancestor Han Quan. There was way too much of a difference between him and the Kunlun army that consisted of tens of millions of troops on the side of the Tao Tai. However, at that moment, although half-martial ancestor Han Quan pointed at the Tao Tai and the Kunlun army opposite him while shouting, the Kunlun army with millions of troops was silent. Countless Kunlun clansmen lowered their heads and did not dare to meet his gaze. The Tao Tai had a dark expression as he said slowly, "That's right, our masters have their backs against Tianhuang Mainland and protected Kunlun. However, what happened to them? They died. I don't wish to die nor do I wish for these Kunlun clansmen who follow me to die. After so many years, the god race has recuperated and is even stronger than the primordial era. As for Tianhuang Mainland, it no longer has the two divine house. They don't even have a single taboo. You're truly naive to think that you guys alongside a conjoint body greenhorn will be able to stop the god race." The Kunlun clansmen at the entrance of the valley had dim expressions and their eyes were filled with despair. They knew in their hearts that the Tao Tai was right. The god race had made a comeback. However, they could not defend against it. The Tao Tai said indifferently, "Han Quan, that's the situation right now. Anyone that goes against the surging tides or stands in its way will be crushed into nothingness." "Tides my ass. Half-martial Ancestor Han Quan sneered, the Kunlun Ruins has a divine powers forbidden region. Even patriarchs of the god race won't dare to barge in. Foo-foo. Right then, a chuckle sounded beside the Tao Tai. Since things had come to this, the three white-robed god race beings no longer hid their identities and auras. Their white robes exploded one after another, revealing golden armor beneath. The black hair of the three god race beings turned into golden hair rapidly. All their disguises were gone. Even without Mahayana patriarchs, 2 armies of our god race are enough to flatten the Kunlun ruins. Those are 2 armies formed by conjoint body mighty figures and half-martial ancestors of our god's mainland. Everywhere the god's sword is pointed at, everyone will have to submit to it. A god race being smiled faintly and declared proudly, the ones entering now are only the vanguard troops. Half-martial Ancestor Han Quan glared at the Tao Tai and grit his teeth. Tao Tai, you've forgotten about your roots. How dare you join forces with the god race? Are you even worthy of being the Kunlun Lord? Whether or not I'm worthy is not decided by you. Gradually, a look of impatience appeared on the Tao Tai's face as he shook his head gently. At the end of the day, history belongs to the victors. You guys will definitely die in this battle, so who will remember you in the future? The later generations will only remember me. I'm the true Kunlun Lord. If you guys refuse to submit, don't blame me for being merciless. The Tao Tai waved his hand and ordered coldly, kill. Ah. Right then, a long howl sounded from the distant horizon like thunder. It rumbled and the clouds in the skies dispersed. Although the howl was still far away, many Kunlun clansmen present felt their ears buzz. It was clear how terrifying the howl was. The Tao Tai smiled gently and said smugly, Han Quan, the new commander that I've just recruited is here. I can let you witness his capabilities. How strong. The hearts of half-martial Ancestor Han Quan and the others skipped a beat. When he heard that howl, the massive body that was fighting against the god race in the valley shuddered and looked back in disbelief. He caught sight of a familiar figure. Green robes and black hair. The cold and merciless eyes of the divine Ho surged with endless longing and joy. Roar. The divine Ho howled into the skies emotionally as well. The 2 howls echoed in the skies of the Kunlun ruins. A god race mighty figure seized the opportunity to charge forward and slashed a blood scar on the divine Ho. The divine Ho was enraged and turned to chomp down, ripping the god race being into 2 as golden blood splattered everywhere. Once again, the divine Ho charged into the army of the god race. Su Zimo's expression was cold as he rushed over like lightning. Extreme Fire and Nian Qi followed closely behind. The 3 of them looked at the figure that was fighting against many god race beings in the god-slaying valley and could not help but recall the paintings they saw in the palace. In the paintings, a divine Ho stood in the middle of the god-slaying valley with its back facing Tianhuang mainland, defending against the god race army in Kunlun single-handedly. The scene before them seemed to be one with the divine Ho in the paintings. Their vision gradually turned blurry. Enduring the misunderstandings of the later generations, the fear of the world and the hostility of the 10,000 races, Night Spirit stood alone in the valley with his back facing Tianhuang mainland, guarding Kunlun. Even though no one knew about it. Even though he might die. Night Spirit still made his choice. Just like his mother. The divine Ho was the true Kunlun Lord and God of Tianhuang mainland. The eternal divine emperor. Chapter 1512, Wrath of Desolate Marshal. Chapter 1512, Wrath of Desolate Marshal. Desolate Marshal. The Tao Tai nodded slightly at Su Zimo with a smile. You came at the right time. That beast in the valley is the leader of this rebellion. If you can kill him, I'll remember your contribution. Su Zimo arrived beside Tao Tai and looked in the direction of the god-slaying valley expressionlessly. Why? The Tianhuang mainland glanced askance. If you don't make a move, You won't have a chance to render your meritorious accomplishments after the two god race armies descend upon Tianhuang mainland and kill that beast. He won't die. Su Zimo suddenly said. The Tao Tai frowned slightly. Su Zimo pointed in the direction of God-slaying valley and said, "Do you know who he is?" "Desolate Marshal, what are you trying to say?" The Tao Tai narrowed his eyes slightly with a cold glint. Su Zimo said, "He's not a beast. His name is Night Spirit and he's my brother." Turning his head slowly, he looked at the Tao Tai who was right in front of him and said slowly, "Sworn brother." The moment those words were said, the entire space seemed to have frozen. The atmosphere suddenly turned extremely strange. Su Zimo and the Tao Tai looked at one another in the eyes just like that. Suddenly, the Tao Tai opened his mouth and released a terrifying suction force, engulfing towards Su Zimo. Almost at the same time, Su Zimo's glabella shone with a green beam of light. The Creation Lotus platform burst forth and spun slowly, releasing rays of light that smashed towards the gigantic mouth of the Tao Tai. Although the Tao Tai had a huge appetite, he could not eat the Creation Lotus platform. If the attack landed, it could smash the Tao Tai's head into sludge. As a half-martial ancestor and the Kunlun Lord, the Tao Tai received countless treasures and resources in the Kunlun ruins. He reacted swiftly and retreated right away. However, he felt two palms appear on his arms. He could not break free even with his burst power. The two of them were way too close. At this distance, Su Zimo had 1,000 methods to kill the Tao Tai. The latter did not even have the chance to escape. Right in front of everyone, the Tao Tai's head was penetrated by the Creation Green Lotus. It entered from the latter's gigantic mouth and created an enormous hole of blood. With that, the Tao Tai's consciousness was shattered. Gripping the arms of the Tao Tai with both hands, Su Zimo kneed forward and smashed against his chest like a galloping horse. Snap! The Tao Tai's chest caved in deeply and most of his bones were shattered. Shing! Flashes of blood spewed out. Su Zimo tore off two of the Tao Tai's arms. In that burst, Su Zimo attacked with hatred and murderous intent, releasing all the killing intent in his heart instantly. The Tao Tai's head shattered and his chest caved in. His arms were torn and his corpse fell heavily into a pool of blood in the distance, not moving at all. Even Mahayana patriarchs would definitely die from the injuries, let alone half-martial ancestors. This scene caused an uproar. The Kunlun army on the side of the Tao Tai had just launched an attack on the God-slaying valley. Nobody expected the Kunlun Lord to be killed by this new commander immediately after. The entire process happened too quickly. The Tao Tai was dead in the blink of an eye. Before the massive Kunlun army could react, Su Zimo had already attacked once more. Swoosh! In a flash, he arrived before the three god race mighty figures. You must have a death wish. The three god race mighty figures channeled their blood chi and released blinding golden blood chi with a terrifying might. In fact, three bloodline phenomenons even appeared behind the three of them. Ma. Ni. Pa. Me. Hum. 1. Su Zimo chanted Sanskrit and released all 6 words of the Beiming mantra. At this distance, even god race mighty figures could not be completely unaffected. The three god race mighty figures shuddered and their blood chi was chaotic. The condensation of their bloodline phenomenons paused momentarily as well. Right then, Su Zimo conjured hand seals and 6 Beiming dermic seals rained down with 6 words of the Beiming mantra, engulfing the 3 god race beings. Bang! 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 The bloodline phenomenons of the 3 god race mighty figures was shattered by the 6 words of the Beiming mantra and Beiming dermic seal before they could even be formed completely. Su Zimo flipped his hand and whipped the head of a god race being. His entire arm looked limp and weak like the trunk of a divine elephant. Piak! He slapped the god race mighty figure on the cheek. Crack! 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 The head of the god race mighty figure spun dozens of times around his neck before coming to a gradual stop. His neck bones were completely shattered. The essence spirit of the god race being was crushed by a single palm strike as well. Another god race mighty figure was shocked. The storage ring on his finger flashed and a gigantic two-handed sword appeared in his palm. The third god race mighty figure swung his gigantic sword at the same time. The blood chi of two god race mighty figures burst forth. Golden light surged on their gigantic swords. It was dazzling and divine. Su Zimo did not dodge or avoid. He strode forward and threw out two punches in reverse against the blades of the two gigantic swords. The two god race mighty figures were delighted. In their opinion, Desolate Marshal's palm would definitely be killed by them. In the eyes of the two god race mighty figures, they could even see blood. Clang! It was different from what they had imagined. When the two gigantic swords struck Su Zimo's fist, not only was there no blood light, there were no injuries at all. However, the two god race mighty figures felt an extremely terrifying power surge into their two gigantic swords. Poof! Poof! Both their arms exploded into a blood mist. Their palms were torn and their fingers bled. Back in the Ling Long's secret ground, even a half-martial ancestor of the god race could not defend against Su Zimo's strength. These two were only god race mighty figures and could not even defend against a single punch from Su Zimo. The two god race mighty figures could not control their bodies and retreated continuously. Something even more terrifying happened. Both of them could clearly see that the surface of their swords were filled with cracks. They were shattered by a single punch from Su Zimo. Pust! The two god race mighty figures were shocked. How could that be considered as a body of flesh and blood? Purple thunderstorm. Su Zimo conjured hand seals and pointed at the two god race mighty figures. A purple thunderstorm formed rapidly and enveloped the two of them. Given Su Zimo's current essence spirit cultivation, the dermic art he conjured was extremely powerful to begin with. But now, the purple thunderstorm had minced the two gigantic swords of the god race completely. There were even many shards of the gigantic swords mixed in the storm, and its lethality was even more shocking as it tore the bodies of the two god race beings apart continuously. Poof! 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 Golden blood splattered continuously from the storm. In a few breaths, the storm dissipated. Two god race mighty figures fell from midair and smashed heavily onto the ground, riddled with holes. The consciousnesses of the two god race mighty figures were penetrated by a few gigantic sword fragments and their souls were destroyed. The vicinity of God-slaying Valley descended into silence instantly. It was less than 10 breaths since Su Zimo's attack. The Kunlun Lord's head was shattered and he died on the spot. The three god race beings were dead with their essence spirits destroyed. This was the wrath of Desolate Marshal. Chapter 15:13, Fighting Side by Side. Chapter 15:13, Fighting Side by Side. Everyone was silent. Even the Tao Tai and three god race beings died before Extreme Fire and Nian Qi could attack, let alone the Kunlun clansmen present. Half-martial Ancestor Han Quan and the others at the entrance of the valley were both shocked and delighted. With the death of the Kunlun Lord, the Kunlun army on the other end was leaderless. Even if they had the advantage in numbers, they might not be able to hold out for long. The entire situation had reversed rapidly after Desolate Marshal appeared. Master, Nian Qi, stay here and guard the entrance of the valley. I'll help Night Spirit. Su Zimo said in a deep voice. On the side of the Rainbow Cave, more god race beings walked out, increasing their combat strength. By this point of the battle, Night Spirit was already covered in injuries. Even a taboo body could not defend against the relentless attacks of so many god race beings. Night Spirit was fighting against an unimaginably humongous civilization single-handedly. Swoosh! In a flash, Su Zimo sped towards the god-slaying valley. Intruder, how dare you! Although the Tao Tai was dead, he had 9 commanders under his lead who were loyal to him and were all half-martial Ancestor experts. Among them, 2 commanders leaped up and their massive bodies blanketed the skies as they lunged towards Su Zimo. The 2 commanders were pure-blooded ferocious beasts and had immense blood chi. Their claws were sharp and they released 2 innate divine powers. Instantly, the mountains collapsed and the earth shattered. Kill! 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 Revenge for the Kunlun Lord. The Kunlun clansmen under the 2 commanders roared as well. Thousands of Kunlun clansmen charged over with billowing dust and war flags fluttering in a terrifying manner. Compared to the massive Kunlun army, Su Zimo's figure was incomparably tiny, as though he would be crushed the next moment without a corpse left. His expression was cold as 2 flames danced in his eyes. He said slowly, "You guys think that you can stop me?" Before his sentence was finished, Su Zimo conjured hand seals repeatedly with both hands. 3 balls of flames of different colors appeared around him instantly. Golden Buddhist Dao Fire. Scarlet Immortal Dao Fire. Black Fiend Dao Fire. Under the guidance of Su Zimo's dermic art, the 3 Dao fires gathered rapidly. After absorbing and refining the Ashoka wood, Su Zimo's cultivation had already reached the late-stage conjoint body realm and his dermic powers were immense. A single Dao fire was enough to kill conjoint body mighty figures. The lethality of the 3 Dao fires was even more terrifying. The hearts of the 2 Kunlun commanders that were charging over skipped a beat as they sensed danger. However, as half-martial Ancestor experts, the 2 commanders wanted to fight Su Zimo's Samadhi Dao fire head-on with their innate divine powers. Humph. Su Zimo sneered and struck out the Samadhi Dao fire in his hands. At the same time, a streak of flames burst forth from his glabella and entered the Samadhi Dao fire. It was an essence spirit fire. If it was just the Samadhi Dao fire that descended, the 2 Kunlun commanders would be able to defend against it barely with their innate divine powers. However, after fusing with the essence spirit fire, the dermic art transformed completely and its power increased exponentially with a bright flare. The innate divine powers of the 2 Kunlun commanders were burned into nothingness by the Kachurati Dao fire. The 2 Kunlun commanders did not even have the chance to escape. In the blink of an eye, they were devoured by the Kachurati Dao fire and burned to ashes. Scatter. Su Zimo opened his mouth and blew in the direction of the Kachurati Dao fire. That single breath contained the purest dermic powers. Swoosh! The Kachurati Dao fire spread instantly, forming a firestorm that surged into the skies and swept forward. Ah! 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 The moment the 2 Kunlun armies charged forward, countless Kunlun clansmen were engulfed by the firestorm and let out tragic cries. When the Kachurati Dao fire was spread, its power would definitely decrease. However, it was more than enough to deal with the 2 Kunlun armies. Kunlun clansmen beneath the conjoint body realm could not defend against such power at all. Even if some Kunlun mighty figures could survive against the weakened Kachurati Dao fire, their flesh would be split open and they would be unrecognizable. The 2 Kunlun armies suffered immense losses and were in chaos. Some of them were burned to death by the Kachurati Dao fire. Another portion was trampled to death by other demon beasts in the chaos. In the blazing flames, countless Kunlun clansmen struggled and howled as they fled in misery. This scene resembled Avicii. A green-robed, black-haired cultivator walked through the flames with an icy expression, like a cold Yama that ruled over hell and judged life and death. The Kachurati Dao fire burned the entire way and created a flaming passage that led to the god-slaying valley. On both sides of the flaming passage, countless Kunlun clansmen retreated. Many Kunlun clansmen looked at the figure walking on the flames with indescribable fear in their eyes. Under the illumination of the flames, their faces were incomparably pale. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo arrived at the god-slaying valley. Night Spirit stood in the middle of the valley and there were hundreds of wounds on his body up till this point of the battle. No matter how strong his bloodline was and how shocking his regeneration capabilities were, his injuries would not heal without a chance to rest. Beast! A half-martial ancestor of the god race stood in midair and gripped a golden sword with both hands. Give up. The light and darkness armies of God's mainland are about to enter Tianhuang mainland. That's the main force of our god race this time round. You won't be able to defend against it. Swoosh. A green beam of light tore through the air and smashed towards the god race half-martial ancestor. Slash. The god race half-martial ancestor gripped the golden sword with both hands and swung his arm, slashing forward viciously. Clang. There was a loud bang. The god race half-martial ancestor shuddered. The gigantic golden sword was sent flying. In his line of sight, he saw a jade-like, crystalline lotus platform with 7 petals blossoming layer by layer. Although it looked weak, it emanated an extremely powerful might. The creation green lotus. What a great treasure. Although the god race half-martial ancestor lost the gigantic sword in his hands, he was delighted instead of enraged. When he saw the creation green lotus before him, his blood chi burst forth and his bloodline phenomenon surged, suppressing the creation green lotus. This half-martial ancestor of the god race wanted to take the creation green lotus for himself. You overestimate yourself. Su Zimo walked over slowly with a cold glint in his eyes. He channeled his spirit consciousness and the creation green lotus spun continuously, emitting a bedazzling green glow that riddled the pyramid phenomenon of the god race half-martial ancestor with holes. Su Zimo's cultivation was not the only thing that increased by absorbing and refining the Ashoka wood. Be it the green lotus true body or the creation lotus platform, both underwent an extremely obvious transformation. The god race half-martial ancestor was alarmed when his bloodline phenomenon shattered. It was only now that he truly realized the danger and wanted to retreat. However, Su Zimo would not give him that chance. With a thought of his spirit consciousness, the creation green lotus transformed into a green streak of light and smashed the head of the god race half-martial ancestor. The latter died on the spot with his essence spirit destroyed. Kill. Many god race beings hollered and changed directions at the same time, charging towards Su Zimo. The death of a half-martial ancestor of the god race could not intimidate the advancement of the other god race beings. After all, there were only 2 people in the valley. However, the 2 armies of the god race were about to arrive. Su Zimo and Night Spirit exchanged glances. There was no fear in their eyes. Instead, there was endless excitement and passion. The 2 of them were fighting side by side. There was nothing to fear even against a massive army. Chapter 15:14, Rebirth. Chapter 15:14, Rebirth. 100 god race beings charged forward and released their bloodline phenomenons one after another. Ancient pyramids appeared in midair with a terrifying might that was extremely shocking. Millions of living beings prostrated beneath the 100 pyramids and prayed fervently with pious expressions. The god race beings spread their arms and stood on the pyramid like true gods. Their bodies shone with a blinding golden light. Barbarians of the East, aren't you going to submit? A god race being pointed at the millions of living beings beneath the pyramid and hollered, as long as you submit to the god race, you'll be protected by the god race just like these living beings. If you resist, your corpses will be suppressed in the pyramid for all eternity and will not reincarnate, receiving the judgment of God. A look of realization flashed through Su Zimo's eyes. The millions of living beings that submitted to the pyramid of the god race should be phantoms left behind after God's mainland conquered other continents. In the primordial era, if the divine house did not stand in the way of the god race here, there was a high chance that the millions of living beings in Tianhuang mainland would suffer the same fate as them. They would be enslaved by the god race for all eternity. The living beings kneeling around the pyramid had pious expressions. They had already forgotten about resisting deep in their bones. The imprint of enslavement had already fused into their souls and bloodlines. At the thought of that, Su Zimo's eyes turned even colder. You are merely some weak pseudo-gods. Su Zimo said slowly, even if you guys are true gods, if you dare to step foot onto Tianhuang mainland, I'll drag you down from the clouds and crush your bones." The moment he said that, Su Zimo's hand's seals changed continuously. Dermic arts were released one after another in a fluid motion that was bedazzling. Sea Burial Secret Skill. Apocalyptic Fiend Fist. Mighty Heavenly Dragon Transcendence. Sandstorm. Great Sanskrit Light Fist. Avicii. More than 30 dermic arts and secret skills were conjured in Su Zimo's hands in the blink of an eye, arriving like an apocalyptic torrent. Given Su Zimo's current cultivation, a single dermic art was enough to kill a god race mighty figure. But now, it was equivalent to more than 30 Su Zimos attacking and releasing dermic arts at the same time. The impact was even more terrifying than the 100 bloodline phenomenons of the god race. Bang! 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 The torrent formed by more than 30 dermic arts and secret skills collided against the 100 bloodline phenomenons and let out a deafening bang. Crack! 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 Cracks appeared and shattered on the ancient pyramids that hovered in midair. The bloodline phenomenons of the god race mighty figures could no longer defend against Su Zimo's dermic arts torrent. Poof! 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 The god race mighty figures had dim expressions and retreated with blood spewing, their eyes filled with shock. They had expected Night Spirit to be strong. However, the god race beings had not expected that the weak human before them could wield such terrifying power. Even their bloodline phenomenons could not withstand it. Is this the cultivation civilization of Tianhuang Mainland? Some of the god race beings were shocked and the way they looked at Su Zimo changed as well. Flashes of blood appeared. A god race being's head was crushed by a sharp claw on the spot and his spirit was destroyed as his headless corpse fell from midair. Before the god race beings could react, a blurry figure flashed. Ah! Immediately after, a short shriek sounded. Another god race being was dead. Night Spirit had attacked. The moment Su Zimo's dermic art torrent clashed against the bloodline phenomenons of the god race and ended, Night Spirit had already infiltrated the god race crowd silently. Night Spirit's terror was only fully revealed at this moment. Prior to this, Night Spirit was alone in the middle of the valley and could only fight against many god race beings head-on, unable to unleash the advantage of the divine Ho race. But now, with Su Zimo fighting against many god race beings and had created a perfect killing environment for Night Spirit. Poof! 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 Flashes of blood appeared continuously. When Night Spirit walked through the god race, he was like the god of massacre in the darkness. The god race beings with their shattered bloodline phenomenons could not defend against Night Spirit's attacks at all. In less than a dozen breaths, more than half of the 100 god race beings that were killed. Su Zimo made a move as well. His essence spirit was fused with the essence of the immortal, Buddhist and fiend sections. With a single thought of his spirit consciousness, his dermic powers could reach the legendary state of being boundless. Even though he had just released the Kacharati Dao fire and more than 30 dermic arts, the power of his essence spirit was still extremely strong under the nourishment of the creation lotus platform. Su Zimo closed his sword finger and slashed forward gently. TSK. 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 Dozens of heaven-slaying sword chi burst forth and enveloped the god race beings on the other end. The sharpness of the heaven-slaying sword chi was way too immense. Even with their bloodline phenomenons, these god race beings could not defend against it, let alone the fact that they had no bloodline phenomenons now. Corpses of the god race fell from midair one after another. Under the combined forces of Su Zimo and Night Spirit, the god race beings in the valley gradually retreated. It was not because they wanted to retreat, but because they had no other choice. Su Zimo attacked repeatedly and Night Spirit roamed the darkness with erratic movements. Many god race mighty figures could not clone themselves and could not take care of both ends. The moment the god race beings relaxed their minds, they would definitely be met with fatal danger. Roar! Right then, an enraged roar sounded from the back of the valley. There were even screams mixed in the roar. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat and he turned back. Outside the valley, there was a gigantic demon beast that was 1,000 feet tall. It was indomitable and its body was grayish-black. It had a goat's body and a face without eyes. The aura of the demon beast was terrifying and it had a terrifying gigantic mouth that seemed like it could devour everything. Waving its sharp claws, it killed the Kunlun clansmen with purple gold ribbons and dispersed the entire place. Even extreme fire and Nian Qi could not suppress the ferocious flames of this demon beast and retreated continuously. The Tao Tai. That demon beast was the Kunlun lord who had just died in Su Zimo's hands. But now, the Tao Tai had revived. Impossible. Su Zimo frowned. Earlier on, he had already torn off the Tao Tai's arms and smashed his chest. It was understandable if the Tao Tai could recover from those injuries. However, earlier on, the Tao Tai's head and consciousness were shattered by the Creation Lotus platform. Even with the protection of his essence spirit dermic weapon, the Tao Tai could not defend against it. How did this Tao Tai revive? Desolate Marshal. The Tao Tai howled into the skies with endless hatred and rage. I'm going to tear you into pieces and burn your bones into ashes. Humph. Su Zimo's expression was cold as he said coldly, Tao Tai, if I can kill you once, I can kill you a second time. Let's see how many lives you have left. The Tao Tai had revived and was leading the Kunlun army to attack the entrance of the valley. However, extreme fire, Nian Qi and the others could not defend at all. Su Zimo was no longer conflicted about the secret of the Tao Tai's resurrection and was prepared to make a move to return and kill the latter once more. Right then, an extremely terrifying aura burst forth from the rainbow cave at the end of the valley. The void above the valley trembled. Chapter 15:15, Light Army. Chapter 15:15, Light Army. Within the cave that shone with a rainbow luster, a group of god race riders that rode on horses and wore golden armor walked out slowly. The horses they were riding were wrapped in golden armor, revealing only a pair of cold eyes. These were no ordinary horses. On both sides of their bodies were snow-white wings and there was even a sharp horn protruding from their heads as they flew slowly in midair. The riders of the god race wielded golden swords and glared at Su Zimo and Night Spirit coldly. Ha 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 ha. A god race being roared in laughter. Barbarians of Tianhuang Mainland, you guys are finished. The light army of our god's mainland has already arrived in Tianhuang Mainland. The darkness army will come right after. The god race riders walked out slowly and each of them shone with an endless brilliance that was bedazzling. Most of those god race riders were at the conjoint body realm. Among them were even half-martial ancestor experts. The half-martial ancestors of the god race rode on their heavenly horses as well. However, they wielded spears with golden patterns and had terrifying auras. The most terrifying thing was that this was an army formed by the mighty figures of the god and half-martial ancestors of the god race. They were orderly and filled with a steely killing intent. After entering the valley, there was no surprise in the eyes of the god race riders when they saw the corpses strewn on the ground. They were expressionless the entire time. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of god race riders entered the valley. There were only slightly more than 1,000 people in the light army. Those who could enter the light army were all the strongest geniuses of God's mainland. Every single horseman of the light army could sweep through any one of the same cultivation realm and dominate a place. The lethality of an iron-blooded army formed by so many god race riders was unimaginable. Furthermore, be it the armor or weapons of the god race riders, they were created by the top sword refinement masters of God's mainland. This light army could even kill the Kunlun army that consisted of tens of millions of troops. Night Spirit had a grim expression. He knew that the test for them had just begun. The god race beings before them were nothing much. The light army was the one that represented the peak of God's mainland civilization. Behind the light army was a darkness army that had yet to appear. What would the situation be like after both armies arrived? At the entrance of the valley, the Tao Tai had revived and was closing in with the Kunlun army. Between Su Zimo and Night Spirit, one of them had to deal with the Tao Tai. Night Spirit, go and get rid of the Tao Tai. Su Zimo pondered for a moment and made a decision quickly. I'll defend against the God Race's light army. Comparing between the front and back of the valley, the God Race beings here were definitely more dangerous. Behind them were merely the forces of the Kunlun ruins. However, on the side of the God Race was the power of the entire God's mainland. Su Zimo had pushed himself onto a cliff by making that choice. Brother. Night Spirit wanted to reject but was interrupted by Su Zimo the moment he spoke. Night Spirit. Su Zimo looked at Night Spirit and said in a deep voice, "You're the only one suitable to resolve the matter of the Kunlun ruins. You're the only one who can suppress the Kunlun race." In terms of bloodline and origin, Night Spirit was the true Kunlun lord. There was an unresolvable feud and conflict between him and the Tao Tai. The two of them had to fight to the death. Once the Tao Tai died, there was a high chance that Night Spirit would suppress the remaining Kunlun clansmen with his prestige. However, it was different for Su Zimo. Those Kunlun clansmen did not agree with Su Zimo at all. Even if the Tao Tai died, the Kunlun race would not listen to Su Zimo. If Su Zimo were to deal with the Kunlun army, he would only be able to conduct a massacre that would not benefit the entire situation. Su Zimo said, "Night Spirit, you have to kill the Tao Tai with lightning methods and subdue the other Kunlun clansmen before you can rush back to help me." "I got it." Night Spirit nodded. "Don't worry, before you return, I'll definitely guard the God-slaying valley and not let a single God race being off." Su Zimo's tone was resolute. After a brief pause, he instructed, "Also, you have to be careful. This Tao Tai has some tricks up his sleeves. I smashed his head earlier on, but he's not dead and even revived. I suspect that the Tao Tai's essence spirit might not be residing in his consciousness. Don't worry, brother." After saying that, Night Spirit's figure flashed and he vanished from the spot. When he reappeared, he was at the entrance of the valley. It was a race against time. The sooner he killed the Tao Tai and controlled all the Kunlun clansmen, the sooner he could rush back to help Su Zimo. "Barbarian of the East, I'll give you a chance. Submit to me now and I can take you under my wing as a personal guard." A half-martial ancestor of the God race wielded a spear and rode on a heavenly horse. He walked out slowly and looked down at Su Zimo. At that moment, the light army had already entered the valley with 1,000 people. Among them, there were dozens of half-martial ancestor experts alone. The others were all conjoint body mighty figures. The God race half-martial ancestor said proudly, "I'll guide you personally and teach you the noble civilization of the God race so that you can break free from your status as a barbarian." "Fu." Su Zimo sneered, "That's all there is to the methods of the God race. You can't even cross this valley after entering Tianhuang Mainland twice. How dare you spout nonsense in front of me?" The expressions of the God race beings from the light army darkened. The primordial war was the eternal humiliation of God's mainland. God's mainland had conquered many worlds and occupied countless territories, enslaving millions of living beings. There had never been such a crushing defeat. The reason why they made a comeback today was to erase the shame of the primordial era. "Barbarian of the East, you've successfully enraged me." The God race half-martial ancestor raised the spear in his hands slowly and pointed at Su Zimo with a golden glow. "Now, even if you kneel before me, I won't let you off. Today, I'll let you witness the power of my light army." Before his sentence was finished, the spear in the hands of the God race half-martial ancestor suddenly shone with a golden light. At the same time, every single God race soldier of the light army drew their swords in unison. Golden lights burst forth from their swords. 1,000 golden beams gathered in midair and formed a golden spear that was dozens of feet long in the blink of an eye. It crossed the air and emitted a shuddering aura. Narrowing his gaze slightly, Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. That spear was not the power of one or two God race beings. It was a secret skill that fused the power of the entire light army. Even Su Zimo felt his scalp tingle from the gigantic golden spear. Suddenly, a warning flashed in Su Zimo's mind. There was no time to think. Electric arcs appeared on Su Zimo's body and a pair of dermic power wings appeared behind him. Finally, his figure transformed into a streak of golden lightning and vanished on the spot. Ethereal wings, lightning escape and boundless golden light. Su Zimo's speed was at its limits after the fusion of the 3 escape techniques. Chapter 15-16, Charge. Chapter 15-16, Charge. Boom! The gigantic golden spear pierced through Su Zimo's afterimage and smashed against a valley not far away, letting out a deafening bang. Countless rocks rolled down and the entire valley shook as dust billowed. Su Zimo's figure reappeared. A grim look flashed through his eyes. The attack of the Light Army was enough to threaten his life. If he had not dodged in time earlier on, even his grade 7 Green Lotus true body would not have been able to escape unscathed and would have been severely injured. And, let's see where else you can hide. The God Race half-martial Ancestor sneered and raised the spear in his hands once more. Charge! The God Race half-martial Ancestor ordered. The Light Army that was initially silent and motionless suddenly circulated. Thousands of heavenly horses flapped their wings, causing wild winds to howl as they rode on auspicious clouds and charged over. Many God Race riders wielded gigantic swords and charged forward with an incomparable aura towards Su Zimo. The heavenly horses galloped and their iron hooves sounded, causing the entire void to tremble. Against that impact, even Night Spirit and Su Zimo would not be able to defend against it, let alone the Green Lotus true body. Su Zimo had a calm expression as he thought of a strategy. The more dangerous the situation was, the calmer he had to be. If it was a normal fight, he could rely on his movement technique speed to maneuver around the Light Army instead of fighting them head-on. However, the place he was standing right now was called the God-Slaying Valley. The reason why the God-Slaying Valley was notorious was because the Divine House massacred the God Race in the Primordial War. If he retreated, the Light Army would advance and join forces with the Tao Tai, Night Spirit, Extreme Fire, Nian Qi, and the others would definitely lose. At that time, even if he had countless methods, he would not be able to hold out. He had to kill the Light Army in the God-Slaying Valley. Su Zimo slapped his storage bag and a jade green long bow appeared in his hands. It was the ancient unique treasure, the Dermic Breaking Bow. Standing in midair, Su Zimo's gaze was burning as he drew the Dermic Breaking Bow. Dermic powers gathered wildly at his fingertips and in the blink of an eye, a Dermic power arrow appeared on the bowstring. Swoosh! His bow was like a full moon and the arrows were like shooting stars. The arrow tore through the air and arrived instantly, shooting towards the God Race half-martial Ancestor in the lead. A look of surprise flashed through the eyes of the God Race half-martial Ancestor. However, that surprise vanished in the blink of an eye and he returned to his old, emotionless self. In a flash, the God Race half-martial Ancestor raised the spear in his hands and pushed gently in front of him, colliding with the Dermic power arrow. Buzz! The Dermic power arrow rubbed against the spear of the God Race half-martial Ancestor and let out an ear-piercing sound with sparks flying. The reaction of the God Race half-martial Ancestor was way too fast. He was also sufficiently strong. Back when Su Zimo was still at the early stage conjoint body realm, he was unable to escape unscathed from a Dermic power arrow of the Dermic Breaking Bow and his Green Lotus true body was injured. In front of Enigma Palace, Su Zimo wielded the Dermic Breaking Bow and shot down many mighty figures of Enigma Palace. Even half-martial Ancestors could not defend against him. However, this half-martial Ancestor of the God Race could attack in time. Although he could not defend against the Dermic power arrow completely, the spear changed the direction of the Dermic power arrow and it brushed past him. When the God Race half-martial Ancestor made a move, he negated the Dermic Breaking Bow almost perfectly. Su Zimo was expressionless. That was because although the arrow did not manage to kill the God Race half-martial Ancestor, when the latter blocked and changed its direction, it shot into the crowd behind him instantly. A flash of blood appeared. In the light army, a god race rider's glabella was pierced by the dermic power arrow and his head exploded instantly. He fell from his horse and died on the spot. Although the god race half-martial ancestor could react to it, the mighty figure behind him was caught off guard. However, the loss of a god race rider was insignificant for the entire light army. The other god race riders had cold, expressionless expressions the entire time. The speed of the light army did not decrease at all. Shield. The half-martial ancestor of the god race in the lead raised his spear and shouted without a change in expression. Before his sentence was finished, apart from the spear-wielding half-martial ancestor of the god race, a thick shield shone with a golden glow on the left hand of the other god race mighty figures. The god race riders wielded swords in their right hands and shields in their left. They rode on their heavenly horses and continued charging with cold expressions. Swoosh. 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 Su Zimo tugged the dermic breaking bow repeatedly. Dermic power arrows tore through the air. This time round, Su Zimo did not target the god race half-martial ancestors with the spears. Instead, he targeted the god race riders with the sword and shield. Clang. 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 The sound of metal clashing echoed repeatedly. Within the light army, the god race riders were shot down by the dermic breaking bow one after another. However, no more bloodlight appeared. Before long, those god race riders leaped into the air once more and returned to their heavenly horses as they continued charging forward with an intensified coldness in their eyes. Su Zimo furrowed his brows slightly. The god race riders were all clad in heavy armor and were shielded by the gigantic golden shield. None of them revealed any weaknesses. Although his dermic breaking bow was strong and fast enough to shoot the god race riders, it could not penetrate their armor. Even if some god race riders were injured, their vitals were not hurt. Given the regeneration capabilities of the god race's bloodline, they would be able to recover his combat strength before long and rejoin the charging army. Even after shooting more than 10 arrows in succession, he failed to stop their charge. Instead, the distance between them closed in continuously. Ha 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 ha. The god race half-martial ancestor roared in laughter and mocked. Barbarian of Tianhuang Mainland, you think you can stop the conquest of the light army with a single lousy bow? You're truly fearless in your ignorance. Su Zimo's expression was calm and he was not discouraged. He drew his dermic breaking bow once more and shot more than 10 arrows. With the help of the creation lotus platform, as long as his essence spirit was strong and his dermic powers were rich, he could shoot dermic power arrows continuously. This time round, Su Zimo's arrows were not aimed at the god race riders. It was aimed at the heavenly horses of the god race riders. The heavenly horses were also clad in armor, but their eyes were revealed. If the dermic power arrows could shoot through the eyes of the heavenly horses, the power of the arrows would be enough to destroy their essence spirits. Once the heavenly horses were dead, the light army would definitely be in chaos and their charging momentum would naturally stop. Poof. True enough, a heavenly horse could not dodge in time and was pierced in the eye by a dermic power arrow. Instantly, its head was penetrated and its essence spirit was destroyed. With a boom, its massive body fell. This time round, there was quite a bit of chaos in the light army and the speed of their charge decreased slightly. Change formation, spear and shield formation. The god race half-martial ancestor raised his spear and hollered softly. When the many god race riders heard the order, they sprawled on the heavenly horses and stuck close to its back, protecting it with the gigantic golden shield in their hands. As such, the gigantic golden shield protected the heavenly horses and god race riders at the back completely without any openings. As for the other half-martial ancestors of the god race, they raised their spears and led the god race riders behind them to charge once more. The god race half-martial ancestors raised their spears while the god race riders wielded their shields. Under the illumination of the sunlight, the entire light army shone with a bedazzling glow and charged towards the god-slaying valley like an indestructible all. Chapter 15:17, Gods. Chapter 15:17, Gods. Su Zimo's expression was as cold as ever. Every single god race expert had extremely terrifying combat strength. Coupled with their almost indestructible armor, they were almost invincible among their peers. If it was a one-on-one fight, extreme fire and Nian Qi might not be a match for these god race riders. As for the 1,000 god race riders, they formed an army and charged. Even Su Zimo felt that their aura, burst and strength were troublesome to deal with. Initially, Su Zimo wanted to use the heaven-slaying sword Qi. However, the armor on the god race riders was made of unknown materials and was tough as metal. Even the dermic-breaking bow could not penetrate it. There were ancient unique treasures in Tianhuang Mainland, the divine phoenix bone, the Soraka flower, the creation green lotus, and it was only normal for similar treasures to be born in God's mainland. Although the killing power of the heaven-slaying sword Qi was terrifying, the damage it could cause was limited when released at this moment. Su Zimo stood in midair and looked at the approaching light army motionlessly, as though he was lost and helpless. And, our god race is the god of the 10,000 races and all will have to submit everywhere the light army passes. Tianhuang Mainland is no exception. The half-martial ancestor of the god race pointed his spear with an arrogant aura. Fu. Suddenly, Su Zimo laughed and shook his head. In the primordial era, you guys suffered immense losses and returned in defeat. You guys won't be able to succeed today either. When he saw that the light army had already entered the depths of the valley, Su Zimo slapped his storage bag and took out a dark gray mountain, tossing it forward. It was the ancient unique treasure, the mystic magnet mountain. Under the channeling of Su Zimo's spirit consciousness, the mystic magnet mountain rose to a height of 1,000 feet in the blink of an eye. A large shadow blanketed the skies and rumbled with an overwhelming might, suppressing the back of the light army with an aggressive aura. Boom! Boom! The mystic magnet mountain descended and blocked the god-slaying valley without leaving any gaps. Hee hee. To think that this ant can even miss when he's throwing an entire mountain. The mystic magnet mountain descended and did not hit a single god race being, causing many god race beings to sneer. Mm. The god race commander frowned slightly and murmured, "Something's not right." The momentum of the mountain did not seem like it was suppressing the light army, but cutting off their retreat path. Suddenly, the many god race beings felt an extremely powerful suction force behind them, pulling them towards the back. The entire light army, 1,000 god race riders with half-martial ancestors included and even their heavenly horses were not spared. The powerful charging momentum of the light army dissipated immediately. The god race riders were clad in heavy armor and wielded swords and shields. Even the heavenly horses they were riding were covered tightly by the armor. The power of magnetism was unleashed to its limits on the god race riders. Nearly half of the god race riders in the light army fell from midair in a miserable manner due to their ferocious charge and sudden withdrawal of momentum. The heavenly horses let out pained neighs and could not control themselves as they flew towards the mystic magnet mountain. Many god race riders could not defend against the power of magnetism either. Boom! Boom! Some of the god race riders stabbed their sword and shield heavily into the ground, wanting to defend against the power of the mystic magnet mountain. However, the sword and shield carved gigantic ravines on the ground and could not stop them from flying towards the mystic magnet mountain. Everything in the world had its counter. The armor of the god race riders and the sword and shield in their hands were indestructible. However, they were countered by the mystic magnet mountain. The swords and shields used by the god race riders were extremely heavy and could only be used with the bloodline and physique of the god race. However, the heavier the weapons were, the greater the power of magnetism they would have to endure. Some half-martial ancestors of the god race were enraged and channeled their blood Qi, releasing immense power to defend against the power of the mystic magnet mountain without budging at all. However, the heavenly horses they rode on let out sorrowful cries. Those heavenly horses could not withstand the pull of the two different powers and their bodies ruptured as they knelt on the ground with fresh blood seeping out of the gaps in their armors. The mystic magnet mountain alone was not enough to threaten the god race. After all, the mystic magnet mountain could only release the power of magnetism and could not injure anyone. However, at that moment, Su Zimo drew his dermic breaking bow once more. Swoosh! 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 One after another, dermic power arrows turned into streaks of light that shot towards the light army, arriving instantly. Poof! 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 Beams of blood light burst forth from the light army. Some of the god race riders wore heavy armor and were already struggling to defend against the power of magnetism. How could they have the strength to defend against the dermic breaking bow? Dermic power arrows pierced their faces and their consciousnesses. The essence spirits of many god race riders were shot to death on the spot and fell weakly. After losing their power, the corpses of the god race were sucked over by the mystic magnet mountain and slammed heavily against it with a resounding bang. Shoo! Shoo! However, Su Zimo's dermic breaking bow showed no signs of stopping. Dermic power arrows tore through the air one after another. The god race riders were not the only ones who died. God race half-martial ancestors died as well. Under normal circumstances, the reaction speed and strength of a god race half-martial ancestor was enough to neutralize the dermic breaking bow. However, those god race half-martial ancestors had to contend against the envelopment of the mystic magnet mountain, and their movement techniques had decreased to their limits. Some god race half-martial ancestors could not dodge when they saw the dermic power arrows shooting over and were killed on the spot. With the mystic magnet mountain around, almost all the god race riders became live targets. With dozens of breaths, Su Zimo shot out 100 dermic power arrows. As for the light army, more than 100 god race beings had already fallen. The arrows were not wasted. The god race half-martial ancestor leading them was enraged. The god race mighty figures that formed the light army were the most outstanding paragons and monster incarnates of God's mainland. Every single one of them had a high chance of entering the Mahayana realm. But now, in just a few dozens of breaths, 100 people from the light army had died. The number of people that died was still rising rapidly. What made him even more furious was that he could not stop Su Zimo's killing intent. Retreat, retreat. The god race half-martial ancestor shouted and released his bloodline phenomenon, using all his might to defend against an arrow that was directed at him. His body shuddered and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. The entire light army began to retreat. However, their retreat path was completely severed by the mystic magnet mountain. When the light army charged over, they were aggressive. In the blink of an eye, they were forced to retreat, leaving behind a trail of corpses. They suffered immense losses. The god race had already lost more than 300 men just by retreating to the foot of the mystic magnet mountain. Many god race riders wanted to cross the mystic magnet mountain. However, they endured the powerful suction force at the foot of the mystic magnet mountain. Even leaping into the air would be extremely difficult, let alone crossing it. Shatter that mountain peak. The god race half-martial ancestor was already flustered as he roared. Clang! 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 Many god race beings waved their swords and gigantic shields to clash against the mystic magnet mountain that was thousands of feet tall. However, they were clad in heavy armor and were restrained by the power of magnetism. They could not unleash half of their strength and could not shake the mystic magnet mountain at all. Su Zimo drew his bow repeatedly with a cold expression. He flew through the air like a god of death, causing many god race beings to feel suffocated. Chapter 15:18, Double Essence Spirits. Chapter 15:18, Double Essence Spirits. Outside the God-slaying valley. Night Spirit had already clashed against the millions of Kunlun troops led by the Tao Tai. He did not engage the Kunlun clansmen and charged towards the Tao Tai directly. Little cub. Do you really think I'm afraid of you? The Tao Tai roared and his spirit consciousness moved. The 5 commanders under his lead charged over one after another and stood at different locations, forming an encirclement with the Tao Tai to trap Night Spirit in the middle. Roar! Night Spirit looked at the 5 commanders and roared at them. It was earth-shaking and released a shuddering aura. It was an aura that belonged to a taboo. The auras of the 5 commanders weakened and they did not dare to meet Night Spirit's gaze. They knew in their hearts that Night Spirit was the true Kunlun Lord and they were the traitors. The Tao Tai could not help but sneer when he sensed the fear in the eyes of the 5 commanders. What are you guys afraid of? That lad has been fighting against the god race for so long and is completely exhausted. His wounds are still bleeding. What other combat strength can he have? He's just an arrow at the end of its flight. We'll definitely be able to kill him if we join forces. At that time, the Kunlun ruins will be our world. The 5 commanders took a deep breath and composed themselves. The Tao Tai continued, "Don't expect that this cub will let you guys off if you submit now. The Divine Ho is bloodthirsty and will definitely not show mercy to those that betray it." Those words of the Tao Tai made the 5 commanders truly resolute. The Tao Tai was right. They no longer had a way out and could only fight. Kill! The 5 commanders hollered and lunged towards Night Spirit murderously. Suddenly, in a flash, Night Spirit disappeared from the spot like a ghost and appeared before the Tao Tai in the blink of an eye. The Tao Tai's reaction was extremely fast as well as he opened his mouth and bit towards Night Spirit's neck. The 2 massive beings were fighting. Beams of blood light surged and scattered through the void. Under normal circumstances, even though the Tao Tai was a half-martial ancestor, he would not be able to defend against Night Spirit's attacks. However, Night Spirit was covered in injuries and his combat strength was greatly reduced in the battle against the god race. The fight between the 2 demon beasts was roughly even. The 5 commanders turned and lunged forward. Night Spirit separated from the Tao Tai and made use of the secret skill of the Divine Ho race to linger around the latter. Poof! Suddenly, a black shadow appeared and vanished instantly. One of the commanders had a dim expression as his life force drained rapidly. A bloody hole appeared on his glabella with fresh blood oozing out. He was assassinated by Night Spirit's tail. The commander had not caught sight of Night Spirit the entire time. Poof! 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 Blood light flashed repeatedly as the 6 demon beasts fought. In fact, some of them had broken limbs that danced in midair as the fight turned increasingly tragic. Melee combat between demon beasts was extremely dangerous. Even if they could kill the other party, it was inevitable that they would be injured. After dozens of breaths, although Night Spirit relied on his ghostly movement techniques to assassinate 3 commanders one after another, he had 7 to 8 wounds on his body as well. One of the wounds was so deep that his bones could be seen and fresh blood flowed uncontrollably. It was left behind by the Tao Tai. If Night Spirit was slightly slower, the Tao Tai would have ripped Night Spirit into 2 with that attack. The battle was still ongoing. One of Night Spirit's legs was snapped by the Tao Tai. An injury as such was not fatal for conjoint body mighty figures. However, Night Spirit had expended too much of his dermic powers and his essence spirit was weak. He could not even regrow his broken leg in the battle. Night Spirit had to sustain such serious injuries in order to kill the remaining 2 commanders. The Tao Tai devoured Night Spirit's broken leg in huge mouthfuls and fresh blood flowed. Even though it was just a severed leg, the blood of the Divine Ho possessed an unimaginable amount of energy. The Tao Tai ate with excitement and his mouth was filled with blood. Night Spirit's blood had triggered his ferocity entirely. Hee hee. The Tao Tai licked his grisly red lips and circled around Night Spirit slowly, saying as he searched for Night Spirit's weakness, "Little cub, you can't hold on for much longer. It's enough to kill you." Even though he was severely injured, filled with injuries and his body was battered, Night Spirit's voice did not waver at all. For Night Spirit, he could kill the Tao Tai completely as long as he could seize an opportunity. For the Divine Ho race, killing was their instinct. Every single bone and muscle on the Divine Ho was not excess, it was born to kill. At its peak condition, the divine Ho was extremely terrifying. If Night Spirit was in his peak condition, the Tao Tai might not survive 3 breaths. The Tao Tai circled to the direction of Night Spirit's broken leg and suddenly lunged forward. That broken leg was Night Spirit's greatest weakness right now. The Tao Tai wanted to seize this opening and kill Night Spirit completely. True enough. Because of the loss of a leg, Night Spirit's turn was not as agile as it was initially and became slower. The 2 demon beasts collided violently. In the chaos, the Tao Tai bit Night Spirit's arm. Sharp teeth pierced through Night Spirit's purple gold scales instantly. That single bite almost snapped Night Spirit's arm. A look of pain flashed through Night Spirit's eyes. However, he did not struggle or roar. Instead, he endured the pain and bit down viciously at the Tao Tai's head. A strange look flashed through the Tao Tai's eyes. He did not dodge nor avoid and continued to exert strength, shaking his gigantic head and biting Night Spirit's arm. He was in no hurry. His stamina and injuries were way better than Night Spirit's. As long as he accumulated a slight advantage and waited, he could exhaust Night Spirit to death. This time round, he intended to rip off an arm of Night Spirit. He did not care about his head at all. That was because even if his head was crushed by Night Spirit, he would not die. Almost all the essence spirits of demon beasts were in their consciousnesses, but he was different. His essence spirit was not in his consciousness at all. It was in the eyes beneath his armpits. After the Tao Tai race transformed into their true forms, they had the face of a goat and the body of a human. There were no eyes on their faces. Their eyes were hidden beneath their armpits in an extremely secluded manner. That was their greatest weakness. After the Tao Tai cultivated an essence spirit, his essence spirit would also be hidden in the eyes beneath his armpits. That was the reason why the Tao Tai was able to revive even after he was severely injured by Su Zimo with his head crushed. That was the key. Even if his head was crushed, if his essence spirit was fine, he could regrow another one. For the Tao Tai race, heads were like limbs. More importantly, there was another reason why he could revive so quickly after being severely injured by Su Zimo and even fight against Night Spirit. He had 2 essence spirits. He had also obtained a huge opportunity in the Kunlun ruins and was able to cultivate 2 essence spirits that were hidden in the eyes beneath his armpits. In other words, his dermic powers were double that of other Tao Tais. He naturally had a trump card to be able to threaten the Kunlun ruins and become the Kunlun Lord. Chapter 1519, Birth of a New Lord. Chapter 1519, Birth of a New Lord. Against Night Spirit's attacks, the Tao Tai did not dodge or avoid and merely bit Night Spirit's arm with all his might. Snap! Night Spirit's arm was snapped by the Tao Tai and dripped with blood. It was a shocking sight. Young Master. Many Kunlun clansmen from the old faction roared with sorrowful expressions when they saw that. Extreme Fire and Nian Qi were extremely anxious as well. However, they were already completely trapped by the Kunlun army and could barely fend for themselves, let alone help Night Spirit. On the battlefield. Of his 4 limbs, Night Spirit only had 2 intact ones left. It was extremely tragic. As for the Tao Tai, he chomped down on Night Spirit's broken arm excitedly and devoured it in huge mouthfuls. Suddenly, the Tao Tai sensed an unprecedented danger and was terrified. His eyes were widened as he finally realized something. Night Spirit did not bite his head at all. Instead, he changed directions the moment he bit down and chomped his shoulders. Although Night Spirit's body was weak, his teeth were even more terrifying than the Tao Tai's. That single bite removed the entire arm of the Tao Tai instantly. The essence spirit that was hidden in the eyes beneath the Tao Tai's armpit was bitten by Night Spirit as well. Before it could escape, it was crushed and devoured by Night Spirit. Ah! The Tao Tai shrieked. He retreated, wanting to distance himself from Night Spirit and start a new battle. After all, he had another essence spirit hidden beneath his other armpit. Even if he had to fight again, he had an absolute advantage. He had lost an essence spirit. However, dermic powers surged in his severed arm and it could regrow in the blink of an eye. However, Knight's spirit was already so weak that he could not regrow his arm. Yet, Knight's spirit's massacre did not stop at all. When the Tao Tai wanted to retreat, he realized that he had nowhere to run. A black shadow streaked behind the Tao Tai and entered his other shoulder blade with extreme precision, penetrating his eyes beneath his armpit. It was Knight's spirit's tail. The Tao Tai's second essence spirit was also killed by Knight's spirit on the spot. How is that possible? Disbelief appeared on the Tao Tai's face as his life force drained rapidly. Even till his death, he could not understand how he was defeated so quickly. Apart from those from the primordial era, no one knows the secret of the Tao Tai race. How did you? The two essence spirits of the Tao Tai were destroyed. The reason why he did not die immediately was because his life force was exuberant. A remnant soul and obsession surrounded him and lingered for a long time. You're right. Knight's spirit said indifferently, indeed, only those from the primordial era know your secret. I know that it's because my father and mother told me all these secrets in the form of inheritance memories before their deaths. The Tao Tai gradually understood. When they left the Kunlun barrier, they were worried that today's situation would happen. Therefore, they told me all the weaknesses of their four commanders, including the Tao Tai race. The Tao Tai gave a bitter laugh. His lineage had always wanted to dominate Kunlun after the two divine house died. To think that he would still lose to the two primordial divine house in the end. The Tao Tai's massive corpse fell from midair and landed in the blood ruins with a boom, causing blood to splatter everywhere. Be it the Kunlun army led by the Tao Tai or the former Kunlun army. All the Kunlun clansmen witnessed this shocking scene. The previous Kunlun lord was dead. It was as though it was a premonition of the birth of a new Kunlun lord. In midair, Knight's spirit only had an arm and leg left as he relied on his tail to barely maintain his balance. However, he stood in midair with an endless might and a cold expression. He looked down at the masses and roared in the direction of the Kunlun army. Roar! The might was rumbling. Many Kunlun clansmen shuddered. Extreme Fire and Nian Qi were delighted. Up till this point of the battle, they could finally see the turning point. Kunlun race, listen up. That Tao Tai is already dead. I know that you guys were forced by him to kill your master and whatnot. If you submit immediately, the new Kunlun Lord will let bygones be bygones. Nian Qi shouted as well, we won't kill those who surrender. Given Knight's spirit's pride, there was no way he would say something like that. Even if he died in battle, he would not retreat or bow down. However, in the current situation, although the Tao Tai was dead, there were still millions of Kunlun troops under his command. Given their strength, there was no way they could defend against that massive Kunlun army if they fought to the death. Knight's spirit was also at the end of his rope and could not hold on for much longer. More importantly, the situation at the valley was unknown. The most important thing for them was to resolve the situation as soon as possible and rush to the God-slaying valley to help Su Zimo. God-slaying valley. The death toll of the god race was still rising in the light army. Su Zimo wielded two ancient unique treasures, the mystic magnet mountain and the dermic breaking bow, and he almost destroyed the light army single-handedly. The cold and indifferent god race riders finally revealed a hint of fear in their eyes. In that short period of time, more than 400 god race riders died to Su Zimo's dermic breaking bow. Nobody knew who the next god race being to die would be. After shooting more than 400 dermic power arrows in succession, Su Zimo's essence spirit could not hold out either. Everyone, heed my orders. Remove your armor and put away your sword and shield. The god race half-martial ancestor finally thought of a solution and shouted, even if we're barehanded, we can kill this person. Many god race beings reacted as well. Right now, they were in such a situation and could neither advance nor retreat. Most importantly, their figures were restricted by the mystic magnet mountain. Although their defense and attack power would be greatly reduced if they put away their armor, sword and shield, they would be able to break free from the shackles of the mystic magnet mountain. That way, they would be able to kill the puny human with their physique and bloodline of the god race even without their armor, sword and shield. How could the bloodline of the human race be compared to the god race? At that thought, ecstasy filled the eyes of the god race beings. Su Zimo smiled as well. After pulling the dermic breaking bow consecutively, his essence spirit could no longer hold out. Just as he was prepared to let his essence spirit rest, these god race beings decided to change their tactics because they were unable to hold out any longer. That's perfect. Su Zimo smiled gently and took out a few elixirs to recover his essence spirit, swallowing them. At the same time, the creation lotus platform held the black-haired essence spirit in his consciousness and spun slowly, spewing out rays of green light that nourished the black-haired essence spirit. With the help of the creation lotus platform, no one could compare to Su Zimo in terms of the recovery of his essence spirit. The burst power of the dragon phoenix true body was superior to the green lotus true body. However, in terms of the endurance of one's essence spirit, the dragon phoenix true body could not compare to it. 1. Many god race beings removed their armor with a single thought and put it away in their storage bags along with their sword and shield. The god race beings were filled with rage as they removed their armor and regained mobility. All of them turned around with fire spewing from their eyes. And of the human race, prepare to die. Don't kill him so easily. We have to suppress and torture him bit by bit. Otherwise, our clansmen would have died for nothing. Many god race beings had just turned around and wanted to charge forward to fight Su Zimo when they realized that the nightmarish figure was striding towards them. Chapter 1520, You guys are too weak. Chapter 1520, You guys are too weak. A god race half-martial ancestor sneered, Good, you even dare to take the initiative to come over. You truly don't know what's good for you. You guys are the ones who don't know what's good for you. Su Zimo said indifferently and did not stop. Before long, he arrived before a god race rider. Kill. The blood chi of the god race rider surged as he hollered. Raising his strong and powerful thighs, he swept towards Su Zimo's head. That single move caused a buzzing sound in midair and a series of afterimages appeared. That kick was way too strong and fast. If that kick landed, the god race rider was confident that he would be able to rupture Su Zimo's head. Bang! However, just as the kick was about to hit Su Zimo's temple, a fair palm appeared on the god race rider's leg. The god race rider looked at everything with widened eyes in disbelief. The other god race beings looked on in disbelief as well. A human was actually able to defend against the might of the god race in melee combat. Su Zimo reached out and gripped the god race rider's ankle like an iron hoop, smiling gently. Is this the power of the god race? You guys are truly way too weak. Snap! Exerting strength in his palm, Su Zimo crushed the god race rider's ankle. Ah! Instantly, a layer of cold sweat rolled down the god race rider's face as he let out a tragic cry. However, the god race rider was impressive as well. He could still maintain his clarity despite his tragic cries and did not retreat in a panic. Instead, he channeled his blood chi, wanting to release his bloodline phenomenon. Bang! Su Zimo did not give him the chance at all. He strode forward and punched the person on the chest. The chest of the god race rider was penetrated instantly and an arrow of blood as thick as an arm burst forth. His heart exploded and his blood chi drained rapidly. Before that person's bloodline phenomenon was fully formed, it dissipated rapidly due to the immense loss of blood chi. Su Zimo's attacks did not stop. After crushing the god race rider's ankle, Su Zimo advanced and punched the person's chest. Thereafter, he propped up his palm and rested it on the person's chin. This was Sanguine Ape Fruit Offering. At this point of his cultivation, Su Zimo was no longer restrained by a single move. He created the martial sutra and was invincible in melee combat. Every single punch, palm strike and action of his contained a mysterious secret. Snap! The head of the god race rider was slammed behind and his neck snapped. An essence spirit escaped from the head of the god race rider with a panicked expression. However, before he could escape from his body completely, Su Zimo blew gently and a white flash appeared, slicing his essence spirit into two. Given Su Zimo's current physique, blood chi, and powerful organs, a single breath of air from him was like a flying sword that was not inferior to divine weapons. The exchange between the two of them was extremely fast and lasted merely a few breaths. Every single move of the god race rider seemed to be within Su Zimo's prediction. He was completely countered and helpless. The other god race beings were not far away. By the time they realized what happened, that god race rider was already dead. How arrogant, Ant! How dare you! They were enraged and hollered. Su Zimo sneered, what noble race! What powerful civilization! That's all there is to it. He stomped heavily on the ground. Boom! Boom! Instantly, the ground shook. Today, I'll let you guys witness my methods. Su Zimo let out a long howl and channeled his blood chi. The sound of a tsunami echoed from his body as he charged towards a god race half-martial ancestor. Relying on the fact that his cultivation realm was a half-step above Su Zimo, the god race half-martial ancestor was fearless. He channeled his blood chi and punched towards Su Zimo as well. Bang! The two fists collided. The god race half-martial ancestor revealed an endless pain on his face and could not help but grunt before retreating instinctively. His entire arm went numb from that clash. I was too careless. The god race half-martial ancestor was alarmed internally. I should have released my bloodline phenomenon right away. You won't have that chance. Su Zimo's gaze intensified as he suddenly spoke and released a sound domain secret skill. Kill. His voice was like thunder and exploded in the ears of the god race half-martial ancestor instantly. The two of them were way too close. That roar caused the god race half-martial ancestor's ears to buzz and echoed in his mind, causing his consciousness to pause for a moment. For Su Zimo, that momentary pause was the difference between life and death. Su Zimo extended his finger and poked the glabella of the god race half-martial ancestor in a flash. Poof! A bloodied hole appeared. Fresh blood gushed out. The god race half-martial ancestor had just snapped out of thunderclap kill when he realized that his consciousness was gradually sinking into the endless dark abyss beneath. The life force of the god race half-martial ancestor vanished and his eyes dimmed. He fell stiffly and his spirit was destroyed, dying on the spot. In less than 10 breaths, 2 god race beings were dead. One of them was even a half-martial ancestor of the god race. Su Zimo's massacre had just begun. In a flash, he charged into the crowd of the god race and rammed forward fearlessly like a divine steed. One of the god race riders wanted to block Su Zimo's path but was sent flying. While his body was in midair, it exploded into a blood mist, leaving only his essence spirit to escape. The other god race riders could not stop Su Zimo either. Everywhere he passed, people were overwhelmed and no one could withstand his sharpness. The entire light army was destroyed by Su Zimo. After the god race riders put away their armor, sword and shield, they were barehanded. Su Zimo was also barehanded. However, his body was a grade 7 creation green lotus that was equivalent to a connate mighty figure dermic weapon. Although the physique and bloodline of the god race were strong, they could not defend against the power of the grade 7 creation green lotus. Without the protection of their armor, although the god race regained their freedom in movement, their losses were even more tragic in melee combat against Su Zimo. Anyone that was struck by the creation green lotus would be severely injured or dead. Before long, another 100 god race beings died beneath the mystic magnet mountain. The light army formed by 1,000 paragons and monster incarnates of God's mainland was destroyed and fled in all directions, leaving only 500 people. Clansmen, don't panic. Listen to my instructions. The god race commander could not hold it in any longer and stood out once more. He used his spirit consciousness to send voice transmissions to the remaining god race riders. If the 500 god race riders were to gather, they would still be an extremely terrifying force. Under the lead of the god race commander, the god race riders gradually formed an encirclement around Su Zimo. A mocking look flashed through Su Zimo's eyes. He did not break out of the encirclement and merely allowed them to surround him. Chapter 1521, God's Eye. Chapter 1521, God's Eye. Just as the encirclement was about to form, the god race commander suddenly shouted, "Everyone, release your bloodline phenomenon." He gave the order. Bang! 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 Ancient pyramids appeared beneath the many god race beings. Millions of living beings knelt around every pyramid and prayed sincerely, looking up at the god race beings at the top of the pyramid. An endless stream of power surged into the god race beings' bodies. The auras of the many god race beings rose continuously. That was the terror of the god race. Once the bloodline of the god race was awakened, a bloodline phenomenon would be born even without cultivating. More than 500 pyramids hovered in midair in an extremely shocking manner as the figures of many god race beings rose slowly, becoming one with the world. An unimaginable might descended. Even the green lotus true body could not withstand the pressure. His bones creaked as though they were about to fall apart. Ah! Roaring into the skies, Su Zimo's aura rose continuously and arrived at its peak in the blink of an eye. His figure seemed to have vanished and was faintly discernible. On the spot, a jade green lotus soared into the skies. The green lotus was transparent and jade-like, emanating an endless glow. Right in front of the god race beings, a lotus blossomed at the top of the green lotus with a bedazzling glow. This is... The god race beings looked up with shock in their eyes. If it could be said that they were one with the world. The power of that green lotus would have broken that world apart. Suddenly, the creation green lotus swayed gently. The world shuddered and ripples spread through the void, as though a rock had fallen into a calm lake. The ripples were weak and rippled towards the 500 ancient pyramids around them. A terrifying scene unfolded. Although the ripples seemed weak, cracks appeared on the pyramids and spread rapidly after contact was made. Boom! 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 Under the envelopment of the ripples, the pyramids shattered and collapsed into emptiness. Many god race beings were shocked. If it was 20 years ago, Su Zimo's bloodline phenomenon would not have been able to defend against so many god race phenomenons. However, after absorbing and refining the Ashoka wood, Su Zimo's green lotus true body grew wildly. Be it in terms of strength or bloodline, there was an obvious leap. Right now, the green lotus true body was getting closer to becoming a grade 8 creation green lotus. Although there was still a distance, it was no longer out of reach. Of course, Su Zimo's bloodline phenomenon did not manage to suppress all the 500-odd pyramids. After merely shattering more than 200 pyramids, Su Zimo's green lotus phenomenon could no longer hold out. However, that was enough. The 200-odd pyramid collapsed and the encirclement of the god race beings dispersed instantly. Su Zimo sneered and reappeared, turning into a golden streak of light. He arrived before a god race rider and slapped in reverse. The bloodline phenomenon of the god race rider dissipated and his blood chi fluctuated. Before he could react, Su Zimo had already arrived before him. You. The god race being only had time to utter a single word before he hurriedly raised his arms, wanting to defend against Su Zimo's power. Snap. Su Zimo's palm snapped the god race being's arms. The palm continued its momentum and slapped the person's head. The person's essence spirit was shattered instantly and he died with his corpse falling from midair. The other god race beings reacted and attacked. However, Su Zimo's figure flashed once more and he had already vanished from the spot. When he appeared again, he arrived beside another god race half-martial ancestor and released his killing move in the same manner. The two of them fought with speed and actually exchanged 3 to 4 blows. The god race half-martial ancestor had a pale expression and could not hold on any longer. Suddenly, the eyes of the god race half-martial ancestor surged with specks of golden light. In the blink of an eye, his eyes turned golden. They were cold and heartless, exuding an endless might as though they wanted to judge all the sins in the world. God's eye. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. He had fought the god race in the Battle of Myriad Phenomenon City. That god race being then cultivated the God's Eye technique, and it was extremely similar to what was happening before him. Of course, even Su Zimo felt shudders when the god race half-martial ancestor released his God's Eye. The divine eyes of the god race half-martial ancestor were filled with a trace of divine power. Su Zimo was alarmed. He did not dare to be careless. Ethereal wings, lightning escape, and boundless golden light burst forth at the same time as he retreated and flickered continuously, wanting to avoid the power of the God's Eye. The Grade 7 creation Green Lotus might be able to defend against the God's Eye that contained a trace of divine power. However, Su Zimo did not dare to take the risk. There were more than 500 God race beings here. Behind them was also a legendary darkness army. If the Green Lotus true body was severely injured because of the head-on clash with the God's Eye, the disadvantages outweighed the advantages. The God race half-martial ancestor was extremely smart as well. When he saw Su Zimo escape with the escape techniques, he was in no hurry to release his visual technique and merely closed in continuously. He knew very well that if he released the visual technique, Su Zimo would no longer be a threat to him. However, he refused to release it the entire time and merely stared at Su Zimo continuously. It was as though a sword was hovering above Su Zimo's head the entire time and could descend at any moment. Su Zimo would definitely feel restricted. The other god race beings noticed this as well and attacked one after another, working together with the god race half-martial ancestor. Some god race beings released their bloodline phenomenons and swarmed towards Su Zimo. Some of the god race beings activated their visual techniques as well, and their eyes shone with a golden glint. They glared at Su Zimo the entire time and closed in on him continuously. Anyone who could join the Light Army were monster incarnates of God's mainland. Every single god race rider had cultivated God's Eye. More than 1,000 golden eyes were fixed on Su Zimo, and he felt his scalp tingle. In the blink of an eye, the situation had changed. The remaining 500-odd god race beings gradually gained the upper hand instead. The Green Lotus true body was created by Su Zimo. Although he had cultivated the visual technique of the Fiend's sex, it did not possess strong lethality and could not compare against the God's Eye. The terror of a visual technique lies in the fact that it was instantaneous. There was no warning at all. The moment Su Zimo relaxed his guard, a visual technique descended. Shing! Su Zimo dodged it by a hair's breadth, and the visual technique landed on the rocks in the valley behind him, creating 2 bottomless holes. Under the pressure of some bloodline phenomenons of the god race, Su Zimo's space to dodge decreased by the moment. Shing! Shing! Another 2 visual techniques had descended. Su Zimo's body was contorted to an unimaginable degree before he managed to avoid the 2 visual techniques. The 2 visual techniques tore through the air and struck the skeleton of a massive demon beast. That was the corpse of the purple hoe from the primordial era. Chapter 1522, Nether Glow Eye. Chapter 1522, Nether Glow Eye. The God's Eye that could penetrate dermic weapons landed on the purple hoe's corpse without leaving any traces. However, they triggered the purple hoe's corpse and caused a commotion. Initially, many god race beings were rushing forward to surround Su Zimo. When they sensed the commotion above the valley from the purple hoe's corpse, all of them were scared out of their wits and dispersed like frightened birds. The fear that the primordial divine hoe brought to the god race was rooted and did not diminish much even after countless years. Although the divine hoe was dead, its remnant might shock history. Actually, the so-called commotion was merely a stone that fell from the purple hoe. The stone was the size of a goose egg and was pitch black as ink. It fell towards Su Zimo from the top of the valley. Su Zimo swept his gaze and was slightly stunned. For some reason, the stone gave him a sense of déjà vu. Such stones were way too common. Even in Tianhuang mainland, they could be seen everywhere, let alone in the Kunlun ruins. However, an indescribable feeling rose in Su Zimo's heart the moment he caught sight of the stone. Instinctively, he reached out and caught the stone. However, the moment he touched the stone, it suddenly vanished. It was as though it had entered his body through his palm. This feeling. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat as he suddenly recalled the illumination stone he picked up when he first met Master Extreme Fire in Songlang Mountain Range. The two situations were almost identical. Suddenly, Su Zimo felt a sharp pain in his mind. Ugh! He grunted and lowered his head slightly, curling into a ball as he trembled. The many god race beings did not know what had happened to Su Zimo. However, this scene was the best opportunity for them to strike. The half-martial ancestor of the god race in the lead glared with golden eyes. His god's eye was focused the entire time and he was ready to strike. Now that he saw that opportunity, he released his god's eye technique without hesitation. He was not the only one with such a reaction. The god race beings of the Light Army were all paragons and monster incarnates. Sensing this rare opportunity, they attacked one after another. Visual techniques tore through the air one after another. Instantly, hundreds of golden beams crossed the void and shot towards Su Zimo. Most of the golden light shot towards Su Zimo's head. Some of them were aimed at the vital points of Su Zimo's body. A small portion of the golden light stabbed towards Su Zimo's surroundings, sealing all possible space he could dodge. More than 500 god race beings attacked and released their god's eye techniques. Beams of golden light formed an impenetrable trap that enveloped Su Zimo. To begin with, the burst of a visual technique was instantaneous and difficult to dodge. Furthermore, after his freak encounter, Su Zimo was rooted on the ground motionlessly with his head slumped as though he could not sense any danger at all. Suddenly, the moment the golden lights descended, Su Zimo suddenly raised his head. There was no white in his left eye and it had turned black as ink. It did not seem like an eye. It was an endless abyss that emitted a chilling aura. It was like the eye of a fiend celestial. All the golden lights that descended beside Su Zimo froze in midair, as though they were frozen. A layer of frost appeared on the golden lights. Bang! 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 Suddenly, the 1,000 golden beams shattered into nothingness. The power of the pitch-black eye shot in reverse. The expressions of many god race beings changed and they felt as though their eyes were being invaded by an extremely cold power such that they could not move their eyeballs. Their gazes were frozen. The next moment, they could not see anything anymore. Cracks appeared in the eyes of the god race beings and turned into ice crystals that flowed out of their sockets in a terrifying manner. The god race beings were blinded. Some half-martial ancestors of the god race relied on the trace of divine power in their god's eye to protect their eyes. However, the eyes of the god race half-martial ancestors were also filled with unbearable pain as tears streamed down their faces. Ah! 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 The god race beings shrieked in pain. Nether glow eye. It's the nether glow eye of the divine Ho back then. A god race half-martial ancestor seemed to have thought of something and his eyes flashed with deep fear as his voice trembled. Right then, the darkness in Su Zimo's left eye faded gradually and returned to normal before long, as though nothing had happened. Back at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley, when the red-headed ghost imparted the illumination dragon eye to Su Zimo, he mentioned the legend of the illumination and nether glow. Su Zimo had not expected that the unassuming pitch-black stone was a nether glow stone. The illumination stone and nether glow stone were both in the Kunlun ruins. The illumination sword formation in the illumination stone was left behind by Fairy Ling Long in the past and was placed in the Ling Long's secret ground. extreme fire brought it to Tianhuang mainland by accident. As for the Nether glow stone, there was a secret skill hidden in it as well. It was the visual technique cultivated by the Purple Hoe back then, the Nether glow eye. The moment the Nether glow stone entered Su Zimo's left eye, the visual technique had already surged into his mind. There was naturally no way Su Zimo could have cultivated that visual technique in such a short period of time. The scene earlier was merely a counterattack triggered by the God's Eye technique of the many God race beings on the Nether glow stone. Su Zimo's green lotus true body did not have any powerful visual techniques. Now that he obtained the Nether glow stone, that weakness was greatly compensated. The might of a primordial taboo's visual technique was imaginable. It was as though everything was planned by fate. Although the divine Hoe had already died for countless years, the Nether glow stone that fell from its body helped Su Zimo resolve the current crisis. Su Zimo turned around and looked at the corpse of the divine Hoe that stood with its back facing Tianhuang mainland. With a respectful expression, he said softly, "Senior, don't worry. I'll definitely not let the God race step foot into Tianhuang mainland." Suddenly, Su Zimo turned around and charged into the crowd of the Light Army, unleashing ferocious attacks. The God race beings were blinded. As long as they could recuperate for a bit, they could regrow their eyes and regain vision. However, Su Zimo did not give them the chance at all. His attacks were ferocious, ruthless, and decisive. He would definitely be able to kill a God race being with every few moves. In melee combat, even a God race half-martial ancestor could not defend against the Green Lotus true body. One after another, the God race beings fell and could not stand up. It was the same scene from the primordial era. Those God race beings were buried in this valley forever. The number of God race riders was decreasing rapidly. 400. 300. The light army that initially had 1,000 people was reduced to slightly more than 200 by Su Zimo. Right then, terrifying auras burst forth from the direction of the Rainbow Cave once more as a dark and cold power entered the Kunlun ruins. God race beings entered one after another. Those God race beings were golden-haired and blue-eyed as well. However, they did not have armor on them. Instead, they wore black robes and did not have mounts, wielding jade-like staffs. When the God race beings entered the valley, it was as though a dark cloud was surging over. The darkness army had descended. Chapter 1523, Arrival of Darkness. Chapter 1523, Arrival of Darkness. The God race commander of the darkness army was a gloomy middle-aged man. He had short hair and a thin face, his eyes sharp as he waved his staff slowly in front of him. The many black-robed God race beings behind him waved their staffs as well. One after another, pitch-black mist spread and enveloped the mystic magnet mountain like billowing smoke. The skies darkened instantly. It was as though the entire world was shrouded by darkness. The temperature dipped. In the blink of an eye, the mystic magnet mountain was enveloped by the black fog. Su Zimo furrowed his brows slightly. He had already lost control of the mystic magnet mountain when the darkness descended. However, he could clearly sense that the power of the mystic magnet mountain was weakening rapidly under the envelopment of the black fog. "Clansmen, the darkness army is here." The God race commander yelled, "Put on your armor and take out your weapons. Destroy this mountain peak and we'll kill our way out." The remaining 200-odd God race beings were invigorated. Although the eyes of some of the God race riders had yet to recover, they withdrew their armor from their storage bags and wielded their swords and shields. Relying on their powerful spirit consciousnesses, they counterattacked in a ferocious manner. The swords and shields of the God race were extremely strong and tough, such that even the dermic-breaking bow could not penetrate them. Su Zimo's Green Lotus true body did not dare to take them head-on either. Wearing their armor while wielding their swords and shields, those God race beings formed an impenetrable defensive formation that blocked Su Zimo outside before long. To be fair, without the mystic magnet mountain and the dermic breaking bow, although Su Zimo's combat strength was torrential, he would not have been able to defend against the power of the entire light army. Now, the darkness army had descended. Su Zimo was about to face a difficult battle. He retreated and distanced himself from the remaining light army temporarily as he consumed another handful of elixirs to recover his stamina slowly. In the battle earlier on, Su Zimo fought against many god race beings in melee combat, and his essence spirit had already recovered almost 70% under the nourishment of the creation lotus platform along with his elixirs. This was the terrifying regeneration power of the green lotus true body, and was also one of the reasons why the creation green lotus was so mysterious. If Su Zimo were to summon the dermic breaking bow now, he could shoot out hundreds of dermic power arrows once more. Bang! 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 After the light army forced Su Zimo back, they did not continue advancing towards the Kunlun ruins. Instead, they turned around and attacked the Mystic Magnet Mountain continuously. Their actions were out of fear towards the Mystic Magnet Mountain as well as anger towards it. Every single god race soldier in the light army could not forget that they were treated as live targets because of the envelopment of the mountain peak. They were completely helpless as they fell one after another. Although the darkness army had attacked, the god race beings were still worried. Furthermore, they wanted to vent the rage in their hearts. In the depths of their hearts, the 200-odd god race riders no longer dared to attack Su Zimo and could only charge towards the Mystic Magnet Mountain. Behind the Mystic Magnet Mountain, the god race commander of the darkness army ordered, and many god race beings waved their staffs, condensing dark spears that were thrown towards the Mystic Magnet Mountain. The two extremities of light and darkness exploded on the Mystic Magnet Mountain. Boom! Boom! The ground shook and the sound was deafening. Such power represented the peak of God's mainland and was enough to destroy the world. Su Zimo focused his gaze. He could clearly see cracks appearing on the 1,000-feet-tall mountain and extending bit by bit. The Mystic Magnet Mountain was shattered. This unique treasure of the ancient era could not defend against the impact of the god race civilization and was destroyed in the god-slaying valley. However, that ancient unique treasure had already accomplished its mission. It was because of its existence that the light army was defeated by Su Zimo. Boom! 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 The Mystic Magnet Mountain collapsed and countless gravel rolled down, causing dust to billow. The god-slaying valley was opened up once more. The remaining 200-odd god race beings of the light army fled towards the darkness army. How could this be? The darkness army commander asked with a frown when he saw that. It's that man. One of the god race riders pointed to Su Zimo in the valley not far away. Gulping, he said, "We can't get through with that person blocking the way." Just one person? The darkness army commander frowned even deeper and asked in disbelief. Yes. The god race rider still had a sense of trepidation when he recalled what had happened earlier. Although he's human. Fu. Suddenly, the darkness army commander laughed and asked in a mocking manner, "Furthermore, he's a human?" The god race rider was speechless. The darkness army commander harumphed coldly. "Your light army is truly getting worse. To think that you would be stopped in the valley by a puny and weak human. It's truly the shame of the god race. Everyone, follow me and kill that human." The darkness army commander said coldly and led the black-robed god race beings behind him towards Su Zimo. After a brief pause, he glanced sideways at the pale-faced and still badly shaken god race riders and sneered. "As for you guys, stay here and recuperate. If you're truly afraid, scram back to God's mainland. Don't embarrass the god race." "You." The god race riders of the light army glared in rage. The god race commander of the light army had a dark expression as he waved it off. "There's no need to argue. The two god race armies can't fight among themselves in the face of a great enemy. Be careful, darkness army." Fufu. The darkness army commander pursed his lips and smiled disdainfully. How can a human be a great enemy? The light god race commander wanted to speak but stopped. Initially, he wanted to remind the Darkness Army commander that the human possessed a gigantic bow with an extremely terrifying killing power. However, on second thought, that human must have expended a lot of energy to tug at that bow consecutively and should not have much strength left. Furthermore, he was displeased by the sarcastic remarks of the Darkness Army commander and harumphed without saying anything more. "And of the human race, let me send you to hell." The Darkness Army commander waved his staff and a black fog spread. The black-robed god race beings behind him waved their staffs as well and chanted many strange words and incantations. A terrifying scene happened when the black fog descended in the god-slaying valley. The god race riders of the light army that had just fallen stood up one after another. Some of the god race riders no longer had their heads. Some of them no longer had arms. Some of them even lost half of their bodies, but they still stood up unsteadily. However, the god race riders were shrouded in black mist. As though they were alive, they turned around and glared at Su Zimo with pitch-black eyes, emitting a powerful aura. One after another, the god race riders crawled up from the bloodied corpses. Su Zimo's expression turned grim. He could sense that the god race riders were long dead and there were no signs of life within their bodies. The resurrection of the god race riders was merely controlled by the black-robed god race beings through some mysterious power. Indeed, Su Zimo had never heard or seen such a strange method before. Chapter 1524, Death of the Commander. Chapter 1524, Death of the Commander. Su Zimo was expressionless. Although he was unfamiliar with the methods of the god race, there were countless dermic arts and 3,000 daos, all of them had similarities. Su Zimo clasped his palms together and lowered his head, chanting an indecipherable sutra in Sanskrit. Om. Ah. Mo. Ga. The Sanskrit possessed a mysterious might. Gradually, a divine Buddhist light shrouded Su Zimo's body and he turned dignified with an extraordinary aura. The Great Light Mantra. The Auditory Release Mantra. The Sensory Enigma Mantra. The Six Paths Diamond Mantra. The four secret incantations did not have much offensive power and were merely used by the Buddhist monasteries to purify souls and release their grievances. Many god race riders were reborn, wearing armor and wielding swords and shields. Even if Su Zimo were to fight them head-on and suppress them, they would stand once more. Unless they were smashed to pieces, they were almost indestructible thanks to the secret skill of the black-robed god race beings. However, if he used a secret incantation of the Buddhist monasteries to purge the dark power from the god race riders, they would naturally fall dead once more. This was a fight between two different cultivation civilizations. The Darkness Army commander frowned slightly and looked at the scene in the valley with a hint of surprise. Initially, the resurrected god race riders emitted torrential killing intent as they gathered once more, prepared to charge at Su Zimo. However, after the four secret incantations descended, the black fog in the eyes of the god race riders dissipated gradually. After losing that dark power, the resurrected god race riders fell once more. Interesting. The Darkness Army commander smiled gently. To think that you, an ant of the human race, would have some tricks up your sleeves. However, you must be dreaming if you think that you can fight against the Darkness Army single-handedly. He waved his staff. Once again, black fogs appeared one after another from the staff. The many black-robed god race beings in the Darkness Army began to augment their dermic powers as dark powers descended one after another to defend against Su Zimo's secret incantations of the Buddhist monasteries. The power of darkness was endless. This was not a one-to-one combat. As the Darkness Army commander had said, Su Zimo could not defend against the power of the entire army alone. The secret incantations of the Buddhist monasteries were indeed a counter to the dark power controlled by the god race. However, the Darkness Army had 1,000 people. The power of darkness released was way too massive. Su Zimo's secret incantations of the Buddhist monasteries could not hold out against the endless power of darkness before long. The god race riders that fell were showing signs of resurrection. Su Zimo's eyes flashed coldly. If this continued, he would definitely be the one to lose. Rather than wasting time with the Darkness Army, he might as well take drastic measures to kill the god race beings of the Darkness Army and sever the origin of their power. At that thought, Su Zimo slapped his storage bag and withdrew a gigantic green bow. It was the ancient unique treasure, the Dermic breaking bow. Far away, the Light Army commander was shocked when he saw the Dermic breaking bow and shouted hurriedly, "Watch out for that bow." Foo-foo. The Darkness Army commander sneered, "It's just a lousy bow. No matter how strong it is, how many people from my army can it kill?" In his opinion, the lapse between each arrow fired from the bow was enough for him to make a move and kill this human 10 or 100 times. Swoosh. Su Zimo remained silent and drew his bow. A Dermic power arrow tore through the air and arrived before the Darkness Army commander immediately. Dark Shield. The Darkness Army commander did not move at all and waved his staff unhurriedly, forming a gigantic pitch-black shield in front of him. He was confident that the Dark Shield could defend against all attacks beneath the Mahayana realm. Furthermore, it was only a mighty figure of the human race. He did not notice a mocking look in Su Zimo's eyes. An arrow from the Dermic breaking bow could break all Dermic arts. Against the Dermic breaking bow, all Dermic arts would not be able to withstand a single blow. What was even more frightening was that the Dermic power arrow released by the Dermic breaking bow could not only break Dermic arts, but also absorb Dermic powers to strengthen its power. In other words, the stronger the Dermic powers of the Dark Shield of the Darkness Army commander, the stronger and more terrifying the burst of the Dermic power arrow would be. Poof! When the Dermic power arrow struck the Dark Shield, there was no earth-shaking sound. Instead, it was as though it had pierced flesh. The pupils of the Darkness Army commander constricted. Right in front of him, the Dark Shield was pierced by the Dermic power arrow in the blink of an eye. Furthermore, all the Dermic powers of the Dark Shield were devoured by the Dermic power arrow. The Dermic power arrow turned pitch black and swelled significantly. It was no longer a long arrow. It was more like a gigantic pitch-black spear. Back then, Su Zimo knew nothing about the Dermic breaking bow, and his Green Lotus true body was pierced by the Dermic power arrow. The Darkness Army commander met the same fate. It was too close. When the Dermic power arrow tore through the Dark Shield and transformed into a pitch-black spear, it had already pierced his chest. Flashes of blood appeared. The Darkness Army commander's eyes widened and he lowered his head slightly. He looked at the bloodied hole in his chest that was as thick as an arm with disbelief in his eyes. The pitch-black spear penetrated his body. The terrifying power nearly tore his body apart. Thankfully, he was a half-martial ancestor of the god race and had a powerful bloodline, allowing him to defend against the terrifying power of the pitch-black spear and protect his body. Even so, his organs were ruptured. If that was the case for the Darkness Army commander, it was even worse for the black-robed god race beings behind him. The black spear passed through the body of the Darkness Army commander. Before its power was depleted, it pierced 5 black-robed god race beings before stopping and its Dermic powers dissipated. Bang! 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 The bodies of the 5 black-robed god race beings exploded into blood mists. The essence spirits of the 5 black-robed god race beings were shattered by the black spear, dying on the spot without any corpse remaining. Against the Light Army, even with the help of the mystic Magnet Mountain, a single Dermic power arrow could only kill a single god race rider at most. However, the Dermic breaking bow was almost destructive for the god race beings of the Darkness Army. How could this be? The Darkness Army commander had a lost expression as though his ears were resonating with the reminder of the Light Army commander. Watch out for that bow. Swoosh. A second arrow descended. The Darkness Army commander was severely injured and had yet to react. Right in front of many god race beings, his head was pierced by a second Dermic power arrow and his essence spirit was destroyed. The Darkness Army commander was dead. Before the momentum of the dermic power arrow was exhausted, it shot towards another black-robed god race being. Instinctively, the black-robed god race being conjured a dermic art and a pitch-black spear appeared before him. He wanted to counterattack and defend against the dermic power arrow. However, his spear was absorbed by the dermic power arrow in the blink of an eye. Poof! The power of the dermic power arrow turned even more berserk and killed that person on the spot. Chapter 1525, Mark of a God. Chapter 1525, Mark of a God. Swoosh. 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 Dermic power arrows tore through the air and shot into the darkness army. Every single dermic power arrow could cause immense damage and could kill at least 3 people before stopping. Initially, the god race beings of the darkness army even conjured dermic arts to defend. However, they quickly realized that their dermic arts were useless against the incoming arrows. No matter how powerful their dermic arts were, it would be destroyed by an arrow. Furthermore, the dermic powers that dissipated from the dermic arts would be absorbed by the arrow to strengthen itself and cause even greater damage. Prior to this, the light army fell one after another against the dermic breaking bow. Now, with each sound of the dermic breaking bow's bowstring, the darkness army fell in groups. Without the protection of armor, the god race beings of the darkness army suffered immense losses against the dermic breaking bow. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo had shot out hundreds of arrows. As for the darkness army, there were only slightly more than 400 god race beings left. As though they had gone mad, the god race beings fled towards the back in an even more pathetic and wretched manner than the light army earlier on. The remaining 200-odd light army soldiers hurried forward as well. Many god race riders set up their gigantic golden shields in front of them, forming an impenetrable defense that protected the darkness army that had escaped. Clang! 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 When the dermic power arrows struck the golden shields, a loud bang sounded and sparks flew. Even the formation created by the light army was in chaos. Clansmen, don't panic. As long as we join forces and maintain our formation, we'll definitely be able to defend against Desolate Marshal's arrows. Under the lead of the light god race leader, the light army rapidly stabilized. Although the light army only had slightly more than 200 people left, it was difficult for Su Zimo's dermic breaking bow to penetrate their defensive formation with their indestructible golden shields. What's the background of that human? How is he so strong? A black-robed god race being that had escaped asked with lingering fear. I heard that he's called Desolate Marshal. We don't know anything else. A god race rider replied coldly. Another god race rider could not help but mock. Wasn't the darkness army arrogant earlier on? Why are you so scared now? There's nothing wrong with that human, it's just that the bow is way too terrifying. A black-robed god race being defended hurriedly. However, his explanation seemed extremely feeble and even attracted ridicule. That's enough. The light god race commander hollered, our light army will defend against the attacks of this human at the front while the darkness army will attack from behind. Our 2 armies will work together and advance slowly. Actually, under normal circumstances, when God's mainland invaded the other land, it was always the 2 armies that pushed forward in unison as well. However, the Rainbow Cave was sealed by the divine house of the primordial era and the spatial tunnel became extremely cramped, so they could only pass through it 1 army at a time. Right now, the 2 armies were advancing slowly in the direction of the God-slaying valley under the lead of the light army. Su Zimo furrowed his brows slightly. The light army raised their gigantic golden shields in front of them and shielded themselves and the god race beings of the darkness army behind them, giving him a sense of helplessness. Even the dermic breaking bow could not penetrate the defense of the light army. Up till this point of his cultivation, Su Zimo had experienced countless battles of varying sizes, but he had never felt such difficulty before. However, he recalled the 2 corpses of the divine house that stood proudly on both sides of the valley. At the thought of Night Spirit, Extreme Fire, Nian Qi and the others behind him, a sense of pride surged in his heart and his gaze turned even more resolute as killing intent spewed out. Against the two advancing armies, Su Zimo flew through the air and headed towards them. With every step he took, his killing intent would increase by a fraction. The world changed. A vast starry sky appeared above the firmaments of the god-slaying valley. However, all the stars in the starry skies seemed to be affected and their trajectories were chaotic. Some of the stars collided and the entire firmament trembled. Killing intent surged into the skies and disrupted the void. Just as Su Zimo's killing intent was about to materialize, a star in the skies descended and smashed towards the two armies. Boom! There was a deafening bang. The power released by the death of a star was incomparably terrifying. The impact was something that even the combined forces of more than 200 god race riders could not defend against. One after another, the gigantic golden shields were sent flying by the meteor. Many god race riders were sent flying. However, the god race riders were still wearing heavy armor. Even though they were struck by the impact, they did not feel anything and stood up quickly. As for the Darkness Army, they were almost completely unharmed thanks to the protection of the Light Army. Right then, Su Zimo's gaze intensified and he transformed into a golden streak of light, charging into the crowd of the two armies. He conjured a sword finger and blinding sword chi burst forth from his body. TSK. 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 It wasn't one or two sword chi. It wasn't 100 or 1,000. It wasn't even 10,000. After absorbing and refining the Ashoka wood, Su Zimo's comprehension of the heaven-slaying sword art had advanced and he could release 108,000 sword chi instantly with his full strength. That burst was almost destructive. The three ancient sword arts represented the Tao of killing. 108,000 sword strikes was almost the epitome of killing. Even the dermic-breaking bow could not break through the armor of the god race riders. However, the heaven-slaying sword chi was different. 108,000 sword chi were released, covering the skies densely and pervasive. Even if the god race riders wore armor, it was not flawless. The armor could defend against most of the sword chi. However, as long as one or two sword chi entered their bodies through the gaps of the armor, it would be enough to severely injure the god race beings. If the heaven-slaying sword chi entered through their faces and pierced their consciousnesses, even god race half-martial ancestors would have to die here. Cling. Clang. The sound of the heaven-slaying sword chi striking the armor of the god race beings echoed. However, after the burst of the 108,000 sword chi, even more god race beings were riddled with holes and died without a chance to escape. Some of the god race beings managed to survive by hiding behind their gigantic golden shields. However, those gigantic golden shields were riddled with holes by the heaven-slaying sword chi and were completely crippled. Su Zimo stood in the middle of the valley and panted slightly as he stepped on the corpses of the god race beings. The release of the heaven-slaying sword art this time round had almost exhausted all his dermic powers and his essence spirit became extremely weak. A look of exhaustion appeared on his face. However, there were corpses of the god race around him and there were rivers of blood. All the god race beings of the Darkness Army were dead without exception. The remaining god race beings of the Light Army were scared out of their wits and were filled with injuries. They looked at Su Zimo with endless fear in their eyes. The two armies were almost completely annihilated. How was this the work of a human? This was the mark of a god. Chapter 1526, Half-Martial Ancestor Dragon Rider. Chapter 1526, Half-Martial Ancestor Dragon Rider. It's over. Su Zimo looked at the dozens of god race beings not far away and said coldly with an indifferent expression. Although these dozens of god race half-martial ancestors managed to survive thanks to their physiques, comprehension of a trace of divine power, armor and gigantic shields, they were filled with injuries. More importantly, the god race half-martial ancestors were scared out of their wits. There was no longer the initial arrogance in their eyes, only endless fear. Suddenly, An even more violent fluctuation came from the direction of the Rainbow Cave, as though a terrifying existence was about to charge out. The fluctuation released by the Rainbow Cave this time round was even more terrifying than the two armies of the god race. There's more? Su Zimo's expression changed greatly. Up till this point of the battle, he had destroyed two armies and had expended almost all his methods, including his essence spirit, blood chi, and dermic powers. If the god race still had tricks up their sleeves, he would not be able to defend against them. It was only at that moment that Su Zimo truly experienced how tragic and difficult it was for the taboo divine Ho to fight against the god race alone in the valley in the primordial era. In the primordial era, countless experts of the god race entered Kunlun, including Mahayana patriarchs and emperors. But now, he felt exhausted against two armies of the god race. In fact, there wasn't even a single Ancestor realm expert. Su Zimo glared at the Rainbow Cave and consumed another large amount of elixirs. The creation green lotus spewed out rays of light to nourish his essence spirit continuously. In fact, he did not even waste his energy to kill the dozens of god race beings not far away. An even more dangerous and difficult battle was yet to come. Finally, the Rainbow Cave shone brightly and a massive object flew out. Su Zimo focused his gaze. It was a massive demon beast that was pitch black and dozens of feet long. It was covered in thick, coarse scales and had a pair of wings on its back. Each time it flapped, a tornado would ensue. The demon beast had the head of a dragon and its gaze was violent and cold. Although its claws were sharp, its body resembled a gigantic lizard that looked extremely strange and gave off a violent aura. Ha 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 ha. A half-martial ancestor of the god race suddenly laughed and shouted, "Desolate martial, you're finished. Half-martial ancestor dragon rider of our god's mainland is here." Su Zimo had seen such a demon beast before in the paintings on the walls of the palace. It seemed like it was a dragon from God's mainland. The black dragon emitted a thick demonic chi and was a half-martial ancestor expert. On the back of the black dragon stood a figure wielding a long spear. His body shone with a blinding golden light like a blazing sun with a rampant might. Su Zimo could sense that this so-called half-martial ancestor dragon rider was even stronger than the commanders of the previous two armies. This was a half-martial ancestor expert who could subdue a divine dragon. Ant. On the black dragon's back, the voice of half-martial ancestor dragon rider sounded with an endless might. "Since you killed my clansmen, I'll flatten Tianhuang mainland and kill millions of humans as a tribute to my fallen clansmen." Fufu. Su Zimo laughed. "Flatten Tianhuang mainland? We'll talk about it after you get through me." Against the powerful half-martial ancestor dragon rider, Su Zimo took a deep breath and with a resolute gaze, leaped up and charged towards the former. No matter the experts of God's mainland, he would not retreat at all. Judgment Spear. Half-martial ancestor dragon rider stood on the black dragon and pointed his spear in Su Zimo's direction through the void. A bedazzling spear was formed in midair and shot towards Su Zimo at an astonishing speed. That dermic art was way too powerful. Before the judgment spear descended, Su Zimo felt a sharp pain on his face. Even the green lotus true body could not withstand that dermic art. Without hesitation, Su Zimo flipped his palm and drew his dermic breaking bow, loading an arrow. Buzz! The bow quivered. A dermic power arrow shot out and struck the judgment spear. The incomparably powerful dermic art dissipated instantly and all the dermic powers were absorbed by the dermic power arrow. The power of the dermic power arrow increased exponentially and grew a full circle, transforming into an even more terrifying judgment spear that shot towards half-martial ancestor dragon rider. Half-martial ancestor dragon rider's expression was unchanged. The black dragon beneath him flapped its dragon wings and roared, extending a pair of dragon claws to grab the judgment spear. Buzz! However, the judgment spear was the burst of the dermic breaking bow and was fused with the power of half-martial ancestor dragon rider. Even the black dragon could not defend against it. The judgment spear streaked across the black dragon's palm with a strange sound. The black dragon's claws were ground into fresh blood. Boom! Right then, a golden streak of light descended and struck the Judgment Spear with a loud bang. The Judgment Spear shattered and dissipated into emptiness on the spot. Half-Martial Ancestor Dragon Rider had attacked. He blocked the Judgment Spear with the spear in his hands. Extremely strong. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. This half-martial Ancestor Dragon Rider was even more troublesome to deal with than the two armies earlier on. Interesting. Half-martial Ancestor Dragon Rider smiled gently. Your bow can actually break my dermic art and absorb its dermic powers to strengthen itself. Half-martial Ancestor Dragon Rider was extremely sharp as well. He had never seen the dermic breaking bow before. However, he could see through the secret of the dermic breaking bow in a single round. However, as Dragon Riders, we specialize in not only dermic arts, but also melee combat. Half-martial Ancestor Dragon Rider shouted softly, "Kill!" With an order, the black dragon flapped its wings and howled in a wild gust, charging towards Su Zimo. The black dragon opened its mouth, wanting to devour Su Zimo. Battle! Su Zimo hollered and his glabella shone, sending forth a streak of green light. The Creation Lotus platform descended from the skies and smashed towards the black dragon's head. Clang! Half-martial Ancestor Dragon Rider raised his spear and blocked the Creation Green Lotus. The black dragon continued devouring and a gigantic shadow appeared above Su Zimo's head, covering the skies. In a flash, Su Zimo transformed into a golden streak of light and escaped from the black dragon's mouth by a hair's breadth. Swoosh! The black dragon grit its teeth and let out a jarring sound. Su Zimo was secretly speechless. Even the Creation Green Lotus could not withstand the terrifying bite of the black dragon. The spear of half-martial Ancestor Dragon Rider descended once more. Su Zimo wielded the Creation Green Lotus and clashed head-on. Bang! He retreated with a pale expression. Half-martial Ancestor Dragon Rider was extremely strong. If Su Zimo was in his peak condition, it would be nothing much against half-martial Ancestor Dragon Rider. But now, his essence spirit and blood chi were weak and his combat strength was greatly reduced. He was actually disadvantaged against a single move from half-martial Ancestor Dragon Rider. Furthermore, half-martial Ancestor Dragon Rider was not alone. He had the help of a half-martial Ancestor Divine Dragon. Right then, another commotion broke out from the Rainbow Cave. Another massive creature charged out with a murderous aura and a rumbling might as it howled. Half-martial Ancestor Dragon Rider was not a single person. A second half-martial Ancestor Dragon Rider descended upon Kunlun. Chapter 1527, Tragic Battle. Chapter 1527, Tragic Battle. Ant. The first half-martial Ancestor Dragon Rider shouted, "You can't defend against the God Race's conquest." Is that so? Su Zimo's expression was cold. Before the second half-martial Ancestor Dragon Rider arrived, he touched his glabella gently with his fingertip and withdrew a whip that shone with lightning from his consciousness. It was the Thunder Emperor's Essence Spirit's secret skill, the Spirit Vanquishing Whip. Piak! Su Zimo swung the whip and whipped half-martial Ancestor Dragon Rider who was not far away. The expression of the half-martial Ancestor Dragon Rider changed slightly. A fight between Essence Spirits was the most dangerous and he had not expected this human to release an Essence Spirit's secret skill the moment he arrived. Furthermore, the aura released by the Thunder Whip gave him shudders. Half-martial Ancestor Dragon Rider did not dare to be careless and hurriedly conjured his Essence Spirit's secret skill to release it. The black dragon he sat on condensed an Essence Spirit's secret skill as well. Two Essence Spirit's secret skills arrived at the same time and collided against the Spirit Vanquishing Whip. Electric arcs flashed and crackled in midair. Although the Spirit Vanquishing Whip was strong, it gradually dissipated under the Essence Spirit's secret skills of two half-martial Ancestor experts. Fufu. The first half-martial Ancestor Dragon Rider sneered, "That's all you've got?" Before the smile on his face disappeared, it froze and his expression changed. A green sword beam shone from the dissipated lightning and slashed towards his glabella instantly. Su Zimo had not merely released the spirit-vanquishing whip. There was also a killing technique targeted at the essence spirit, the green lotus sword. That half-martial ancestor dragon rider's eyes were widened. In a hurry, he channeled his spirit consciousness once more and released a terrifying spirit consciousness, wanting to defend against the green lotus sword. A green light flashed. The green lotus sword split the spirit consciousness released by that half-martial ancestor dragon rider into two and entered his glabella. A single slash destroyed his essence spirit. This half-martial ancestor dragon rider wore armor and was intact without any injuries. However, his life force drained rapidly and his gaze dimmed. The person's head tilted to the side and he fell from the black dragon's body. That was the danger of essence spirit fights. If one was careless, his essence spirit would be destroyed and he would die. Apart from the power of the spirit-vanquishing whip and green lotus sword, the reason why Su Zimo could kill this half-martial ancestor dragon rider was because the latter knew nothing about Su Zimo. Furthermore, that person had underestimated Su Zimo, resulting in the current state of things. Roar! Sensing the death of its master, the black dragon roared and charged towards Su Zimo as though it had gone mad. The second half-martial ancestor dragon rider had already arrived. This was equivalent to 3 half-martial ancestor experts attacking Su Zimo, who was at the end of his rope at the same time. Bang! Relying on his movement technique, Su Zimo flickered. However, he was still a tad too slow in the end and was sent flying as a spear swept across his chest. A piece of flesh on his thigh was torn off by the black dragon and fresh blood flowed. Bang! Su Zimo slammed heavily onto the ground and his tendons and bones felt like they were about to split. Right then, another commotion broke out in the Rainbow Cave. A third half-martial ancestor dragon rider charged out. Su Zimo struggled to stand up and his heart sank. He could not defend against it. God's mainland was much stronger than he had imagined. At that moment, the dragon phoenix true body was cultivating in seclusion in the ancestral ground of the dragon race. Even he could not sense it or establish any connection with it. Right now, he could only call out to the martial Dao prime body. However, it was already too late even if he alarmed the martial Dao prime body now. It would take at least a few days for the martial Dao prime body to arrive at the Kunlun ruins. At that time, the god race would have long flattened the Kunlun ruins and entered Tianhuang mainland. Ant, you killed my master. I'm going to let you have a taste of the wrath of the dragon race. The black dragon spoke in human tongue and glared at Su Zimo with ferocious eyes, drooling with its pitch-black, gooey dragon saliva. Suddenly, the black dragon opened its mouth and spat out a terrifying black flame from the depths of its throat that swept towards Su Zimo. If it was any other time, Su Zimo would have countless methods to deal with it. He could have drawn the dermic breaking bow and destroyed the black flame with a single arrow. However, at that moment, he did not even have the strength to draw the dermic breaking bow. Just as the flame was about to descend on Su Zimo, a gigantic phantom-like figure appeared beside the black dragon. The massive demon beast reached out with its sharp claws and grabbed the black dragon's neck. Its sharp claws tore through the scales on the black dragon's body and almost snapped its thick neck. Fresh blood gushed out. The demon beast opened its mouth and chomped down on the black dragon's head. Crack! The head of the black dragon was crushed by the terrifying demon beast instantly. Before the black flame landed on Su Zimo, it was extinguished and dissipated in midair. The half-martial ancestor black dragon was bitten to death. The gigantic dragon head was crushed and disfigured. The black dragon died in a tragic manner and its massive body fell from midair. Su Zimo was invigorated when he saw that. It was Night Spirit. Night Spirit had rushed over. Roar! Night Spirit opened his mouth and bared his menacing fangs. He roared at the other 2 half-martial ancestors and it was deafening. It was fine for the 2 half-martial ancestor dragon riders and they were able to maintain their composures. However, the black dragons they were riding on shuddered and nearly fell from midair with endless fear in their eyes. The fear of the divine Ho race had long seeped into their bones. Although Night Spirit was injured all over, he was still majestic and exuded a thick murderous aura. His ferocity was unparalleled and it threatened everyone. How can you guys be considered as dragons? You're merely bugs with wings. Night Spirit stepped on the black dragon's corpse with a murderous aura. Right then, a fourth half-martial Ancestor dragon rider appeared in the Rainbow Cave. Su Zimo's expression turned grim. By the looks of it, there were definitely not many half-martial Ancestor dragon riders. However, every single one of them was way too strong. Up till this point of the battle, he and Night Spirit were in terrible conditions. These 4 half-martial Ancestor dragon riders were extremely troublesome for them to deal with. The 2 of them alone might not be able to defend against the attacks of the god race. Roar! Night Spirit roared once more. Boom! 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 Right then, an earth-shaking sound came from behind Su Zimo, as though a massive army was charging over with the ground trembling. Su Zimo turned around instinctively. Dust billowed in the valley as countless Kunlun clansmen charged over with a mighty aura. It was even more terrifying than a massive army. A Kunlun army with 10 million troops charged towards Su Zimo's direction. However, when they arrived before him, they wrapped around both sides and charged towards the 4 half-martial Ancestor dragon riders. At that moment, Su Zimo understood. Night Spirit had already become the new Kunlun lord. He led all the Kunlun clansmen and charged towards the god race. It was a counterattack from Kunlun. It was a counterattack from the divine Ho race. This time round, Night Spirit was not guarding Kunlun alone. He had Su Zimo by his side. He had the entire Kunlun race. The inclusion of the Kunlun army pushed this tragic battle to its limits. Chapter 1528, Sword of Misfortune. Chapter 1528, Sword of Misfortune. Young master, how are you? Among the Kunlun army, a golden-haired, blue-eyed girl helped Su Zimo up and asked in concern. She was none other than Mian Qi. I am fine. Su Zimo took a deep breath of air and continued consuming elixirs. The Creation Lotus platform was already nourishing his essence spirit in his consciousness and recovering his dermic powers. Take a rest here first. We'll head up and fight for a while. Extreme Fire said in a deep voice, don't worry, the Kunlun race has already submitted to Night Spirit. Although the god race is strong, the Kunlun army has 10 million troops and will definitely be able to defend against the god race's attack. He was not wrong. There was the saying that ants could bite an elephant to death. Under Night Spirit's lead, the Kunlun army that contained 10 million troops almost formed a gigantic torrent that charged towards the remaining 3 half-martial Ancestor dragon riders. Initially, there were more than 10 severely injured god race riders lying in the valley. Before the god race riders could react, they were drowned by the Kunlun army and trampled into sludge. Boom! The Kunlun army collided with the 3 half-martial Ancestor dragon riders, causing a loud bang. The moment of the collision, 100 Kunlun clansmen died in the hands of 3 half-martial Ancestor dragon riders. Flesh and blood splattered on the battlefield. The 3 half-martial Ancestor dragon riders were way too strong. If it was anyone else, they would have been drowned by the Kunlun army instantly. However, the 3 half-martial Ancestor dragon riders rode on their black dragons and fought against the Kunlun army without retreating at all. Most of the Kunlun clansmen were killed by the 3 black dragons before they could reach the half-martial Ancestor dragon riders. Although the black dragons could not withstand a single blow from Night Spirit, they were definitely an invincible existence against the ordinary Kunlun clansmen. Swoosh! The 3 black dragons spewed out 3 balls of black flames at the same time and burned towards the Kunlun army. Samadhi Dao Fire. Extreme Fire hollered and conjured hand seals, channeling the Scarlet Flame Heart Sutra to release the Samadhi Dao fire and channeling his essence spirit to its limits. Through the baptism of this battle, Extreme Fire was also transforming. His Samadhi Dao fire had become even purer and more condensed. Many Kunlun mighty figures and half-martial ancestors released dermic arts as well. Instantly, a fire rain descended and a torrent rumbled, colliding against the black flames spat out by the 3 black dragons as dermic powers surged. The rainbow cave shone brightly and a 5th half-martial ancestor dragon rider descended. However, the moment the 5th half-martial ancestor dragon rider descended, Night Spirit appeared in the skies and suddenly attacked like a ghost. This half-martial ancestor dragon rider's reaction was extremely fast as well. In a flash, he avoided Night Spirit's lethal attack and propped up his spear, stabbing upwards. Clang! Night Spirit's tail swayed gently and a black shadow flashed. It collided with the spear of the half-martial ancestor dragon rider and sparks flew. Snap! However, the black dragon beneath the half-martial ancestor dragon rider could not escape from Night Spirit's pursuit. Its neck was snapped and fresh blood spewed. This half-martial ancestor dragon rider was enraged and fought against Night Spirit. Night Spirit was also exhausted and filled with injuries. The two of them fought in a treacherous manner and Night Spirit had to pay a price of more than 10 wounds to kill the 5th half-martial ancestor dragon rider. Night Spirit took a deep breath and gathered his spirit, limping as he charged towards the other 3 half-martial ancestor dragon riders. Although the Kunlun army had many people, they could only sacrifice their lives continuously and barely block the 3 half-martial ancestor dragon riders from entering the valley. The power of the Kunlun army was not enough to threaten the half-martial ancestor dragon riders who were clad in armor. The reason why the Kunlun army could fight against the half-martial ancestor dragon riders was because of Night Spirit. Before long, a 6th half-martial ancestor dragon rider descended. Not long after, a 7th half-martial ancestor dragon rider appeared. Every single half-martial ancestor dragon rider could cause immense damage and impact to the Kunlun army. There was no need for more. 10 half-martial ancestor dragon riders would most likely be able to break apart the Kunlun army with 10 million troops. At that moment, Su Zimo had recovered quite a bit of stamina and joined the battle once more. Night Spirit hid in the dark the entire time. In fact, even without appearing, he posed a huge threat and exerted immense pressure on the half-martial ancestor dragon riders. If Night Spirit did not appear, the half-martial ancestor dragon riders present would have to be wary of him the entire time. Night Spirit could also make use of the opportunity to rest and heal while waiting for an opportunity to strike. More and more Kunlun clansmen died in the valley. If not for Night Spirit, the Kunlun race would have collapsed and fled long ago. However, with Night Spirit guarding this place and Su Zimo charging at the front, the Kunlun clansmen forgot about life and death and fought continuously, roaring. Many Kunlun clansmen were enraged as well. Fresh blood, corpses, severed limbs. Everywhere was filled with blood. The Kunlun race suffered immense losses and the half-martial ancestor dragon riders were dying as well. This battle lasted for half a day and countless Kunlun clansmen died in the valley. There were truly rivers of blood. As for the half-martial ancestor dragon riders of the god race, 27 of them were killed by the combined strength of Su Zimo, Night Spirit and many Kunlun clansmen. Finally, Night Spirit bit the last black dragon in the valley to death. He sprawled on the black dragon and panted heavily. He did not even have the strength to move. Su Zimo had just killed the last half-martial ancestor dragon rider as well. In exchange, his ribs were completely broken and his organs were shattered with blood flowing endlessly. Every single breath he took carried a strong blood stench and his life force was weak. The injuries were way too severe this time round. In his consciousness, even the creation lotus platform stopped spinning and its glow dimmed. Even the powerful regeneration capabilities of the green lotus true body could not heal such a serious injury. He probably required the primordial divine spring in order to recover. Su Zimo, Night Spirit, Extreme Fire, Nian Qi, and many other Kunlun clansmen were drenched in blood as they looked at the rainbow cave not far away with nervous expressions. 15 minutes passed. 30 minutes passed. The god race no longer appeared in the rainbow cave. Was it over? Many Kunlun clansmen did not look happy. Instead, they looked pained. Countless clansmen that had lived with them for tens of thousands of years fell forever, never to stand up again. Although they managed to defend Kunlun, the price they had to pay for this battle was way too great. Nian Qi lowered her head slightly and did not dare to look at the Kunlun clansman or Night Spirit. Although she was fighting alongside Su Zimo, Night Spirit, and the Kunlun race, the blood of the god race flowed through her body after all. Everything that happened was caused by her clansmen. She lowered her head in silence, looking troubled. Let's return. Su Zimo said softly. There was a deep fatigue in his voice. Suddenly, before everyone turned around, another commotion broke out from the direction of the rainbow cave. Everyone was aghast. At that moment, if a god race army or whatnot were to appear, it would definitely be a disaster for them. Another half-martial Ancestor dragon rider charged out of the rainbow cave. This half-martial Ancestor dragon rider was clearly different from those before. He was no longer riding a black dragon. Instead, he was riding a gigantic pitch-black bone dragon that had no flesh and was lined with sharp spikes. This half-martial Ancestor dragon rider wore a black crown on his head as well. He was the dragon rider commander. The dragon rider commander withdrew a gigantic sword from his storage ring slowly. The gigantic sword was filled with black patterns and possessed a dark and cold power that was extremely pure. The dragon rider commander said slowly, "Ants of Tianhuang Mainland, you killed 2 armies of the god race and many dragon riders. Today, I'll invite one of the 4 great divine weapons of God's mainland, the Sword of Misfortune. Misfortune has arrived. On behalf of God's mainland, I shall execute divine judgment on you guys." Chapter 1529, Divine Power Storm. Chapter 1529, Divine Power Storm. The Dragon Rider commander channeled his divine power and the black patterns on the Sword of Misfortune deepened. It emanated a power that resembled black spider silk and spread in all directions. The entire world seemed to be enveloped by the black spider silk, forming gigantic pitch-black webs. Some Kunlun clansmen could not dodge in time and were tainted by the black spider silk. Their expressions froze and their life forces decreased instantly. Under the envelopment of the black spider silk, Kunlun clansmen fell one after another. Be it the Kunlun mighty figures or half-martial ancestors, as long as they were tainted by the black spider silk, their bodies would be filled with strange black patterns and they would die on the spot. They died with grievances before their essence spirits could even escape. This is the web of misfortune. The half-martial Ancestor dragon rider walked slowly toward Su Zimo and the others and said coldly, "All of you are merely prey in the web of misfortune. None of you can escape the divine judgment of misfortune." The eyes of many Kunlun clansmen were filled with deep fear. Even against this half-martial Ancestor dragon rider, the Kunlun race dared to fight him head-on. However, against the Sword of Misfortune and the unknown terrifying power, the Kunlun race finally collapsed. There was nothing that could defend against that web of misfortune. When dermic arts landed on it, they were devoured silently and could not even cause any ripples. Even dermic weapons would be stained with black patterns and reduced to useless items if they were struck by the web of misfortune. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of thousands of Kunlun clansmen fell forever without standing up. Su Zimo stood at the front. Black spider silk landed on his green lotus true body as well. A strange power surged into the green lotus true body through the wound. It was dark and cold, destroying the life force of the green lotus true body. If the green lotus true body was in his peak condition, he might be able to defend against the web of misfortune. But now, the green lotus true body was extremely damaged and could not defend against that strange power. The most frightening thing was that this was not the full power of the Sword of Misfortune. Simply put, the web of misfortune was merely the aura released by the gigantic sword, similar to sword chi. Even so, it was enough to kill all the Kunlun clansmen. If the sword of misfortune were to slash down, who could defend against it? Even if Su Zimo was in his peak condition, he might not be able to defend against it. The four divine weapons, the sword of misfortune. He truly did not know what sort of methods God's mainland used or how long it took for them to create such a dark and evil weapon. With two unique treasures, Su Zimo almost buried two god race armies. But now that the god race had summoned the sword of misfortune from their four divine weapons, they wanted to bury Su Zimo, Night Spirit and everyone from the Kunlun race as well. Retreat! Su Zimo shouted softly. Zimo! Young master! Extreme Fire and Nian Qi were alarmed and wanted to advance. Night Spirit struggled to stand up from the Black Dragon's corpse as well, wanting to stand shoulder to shoulder with Su Zimo to resist the sword of misfortune. All of you, retreat! Turning around, Su Zimo hollered with a sharp gaze. Extreme Fire and Nian Qi were slightly stunned. They had never seen such a stern expression on Su Zimo's face. That sword is very terrifying. We can't defend against it. Su Zimo said in a deep voice, retreat to the Ling Long's secret ground immediately and leave the Kunlun ruins. Zimo, what about you? Extreme Fire asked loudly. I can't leave anymore. Su Zimo chuckled bitterly. At that moment, if not for the creation Green Lotus supporting his consciousness, the dark and cold power would have surged into his consciousness and killed his essence spirit. Night Spirit's eyes were bloodshot. He wanted to charge forward but was swarmed by the many Kunlun clansmen as they retreated to the back of the valley. He was already exhausted and his aura was weak. Even after struggling a few times, he could not break free from the guards of the Kunlun race. He could only watch Su Zimo's figure turn smaller in the valley as a sense of helplessness rose in his heart. Ah! Ah! Night Spirit reared his head and howled into the skies. His voice was tragic, filled with endless sadness as though he was weeping. Su Zimo's consciousness gradually faded and his vision began to blur. He could vaguely see the Dragon Rider commander approaching with the sword of misfortune in his hands. Suddenly, the footsteps stopped in front of him. Fufu. The Dragon Rider commander sneered, Ant, you're very strong to be able to hold out till now. However, you still have to die. It's your honor to die to the sword of misfortune. He raised the gigantic sword in his hands and stabbed it toward Su Zimo's chest. Flashes of blood spewed out. The sword of misfortune pierced the Green Lotus true body instantly and a gigantic sword tip pierced through Su Zimo's back, dripping with blood. Young master. Nian Qi had a pained expression and tears streamed down her face. Extreme Fire shuddered as well and clenched his fists with endless rage in his eyes. The web of misfortune released by the aura of the sword of misfortune alone was already so terrifying that it was enough to kill all mighty figures and half-martial ancestors. What sort of a level was the power of the sword of misfortune at? Even Mahayana patriarchs might not be able to survive against the sword of misfortune, let alone a conjoint body mighty figure like Su Zimo. Suddenly, Extreme Fire's expression changed as he asked sternly, what's that? He was not the only one, Nian Qi, Night Spirit and the other Kunlun clansmen sensed it as well. An extremely vast power burst forth from the direction of Su Zimo and the Dragon Rider commander. In the face of that power, everyone seemed incomparably tiny, as though they could be drowned and vanish at any moment. This was not the power of the sword of misfortune. The aura of that power was completely different from the sword of misfortune. The moment that power appeared, the dark and cold web of misfortune that filled the valley dissipated silently. The power spiraled in the valley and with Su Zimo, the Dragon Rider commander, as the center, it began to spin. I got it. Extreme Fire said in a deep voice, the power of this sword of misfortune triggered the divine power forbidden region of the Kunlun ruins and created a divine power storm. After Extreme Fire said that, the divine power storm in the valley was formed. The figure of Su Zimo and the half-martial ancestor dragon rider were faintly visible in the divine power storm. Ah! Nian Qi exclaimed with a pale face as she murmured instinctively, "Divine power storm? Won't the young master be torn into pieces by it?" The divine power storm was divided into 3 types. There was the lesser, greater and supreme divine power storm. However, even the lesser divine power storm was enough to tear some Mahayana patriarchs apart, let alone Su Zimo, who was at the conjoint body realm. Ah! Before Nian Qi's sentence was finished, the tragic cry of the dragon rider commander sounded. In the divine power storm, the body of the dragon rider commander expanded at a visible speed and released a tremendous amount of life force. The life force was way too massive and the body of the dragon rider commander could not accommodate it at all. It expanded and his body exploded into a blood mist. His essence spirit was torn apart by the divine power storm and turned into dust, dying on the spot. Chapter 1530, Fortune in Disaster. Chapter 1530, Fortune in Disaster. Su Zimo was a little dazed and drowsy. He could vaguely sense that something seemed to have happened to the dragon rider commander. The latter let out a tragic cry and went silent thereafter. How could this be? What happened? Is that dragon rider commander dead? Su Zimo's mind was in a mess. The power of the Sword of Misfortune had already broken through the defense of the Creation Lotus platform. The black-haired essence spirit was filled with the strange power of the black spider silk and his life force was decreasing rapidly. The Creation Green Lotus was motionless and its life force was weak. Right then, an extremely majestic life force surged into his body and was actually healing his injuries continuously. Even the dark and cold power of the Sword of Misfortune could not block that tremendous life force. Initially, Su Zimo's black-haired essence spirit was already on the brink of death. However, after that tremendous life force was injected into his consciousness, his black-haired essence spirit gradually recovered. The black silk on the Creation Lotus platform gradually melted as well. Against the boundless life force, the power of the Sword of Misfortune melted silently like snow meeting a blazing sun. Before long, the power of misfortune that invaded Su Zimo's body was dissipated by that massive life force. The Sword of Misfortune that pierced his chest was being pulled out bit by bit, as though there was a force tugging it. Before long, with a bang, the divine weapon of the gods Mainland was pulled out from Su Zimo's chest and fell to the ground in silence. After the tremendous life force expelled the Sword of Misfortune, it did not show any signs of stopping and surged into Su Zimo's body wildly. Su Zimo's meridians, organs and flesh that were initially devoid of life gradually regained their vitality under the stimulation of that tremendous amount of life force. His consciousness began to return as well. Before long, he woke up. What happened? Su Zimo was slightly stunned and looked over. He realized that he was in a gigantic storm. The storm contained an extremely massive and rich life force that was as vast as an ocean and surged into his body continuously. The wounds on his body were healing at a visible speed. Before long, scabs formed and fell off. There were no scars at all around his wounds and they were smooth as jade. His injuries were also recovering rapidly. In this battle, the Green Lotus true body was almost crippled and extremely damaged. It could only be repaired by the primordial divine spring. But now that the tremendous life force surged into his body, the effect seemed to be even more intense than the primordial divine spring. It's the divine power storm. Su Zimo quickly realized what had happened to him. Half-martial ancestor dragon rider summoned the Sword of Misfortune. Although the aura of the Sword of Misfortune was strong, it was not strong enough to trigger the divine power storm. However, later on, half-martial ancestor dragon rider used the power of the Sword of Misfortune itself and stabbed it into his chest. Immediately, a divine power storm was triggered. The storyteller had once said that the divine power storm was caused by the remnant power of divine powers. That was also the reason why the power released by each divine power storm was different. If it was an offensive divine power that triggered a divine power storm, it would definitely possess an extremely terrifying killing power that could rip cultivators apart with ease. However, the divine power storm before him was clearly triggered by a healing-type divine power. It did not mean that a healing divine power storm was harmless. As long as it was a divine power, its power was shocking and was as vast as the sea. It was not something that mighty figures or half-martial ancestors could withstand. The healing divine power surged into half-martial ancestor Dragon Rider's body continuously with its immense life force. Unable to withstand the massive life force, half-martial ancestor Dragon Rider's physical body exploded and he died on the spot. The logic was simple: vegetation required rain. However, if a torrent were to descend, only a single outcome awaited all the vegetation: death. Simply put, the Dragon Rider commander died from an overload of the tremendous life force triggered by the divine power storm. The reason why Su Zimo was fine up till now was because more than half of the tremendous life force had been negated by the power of the Sword of Misfortune. As for Su Zimo, his body was extremely damaged and almost died. Not only did the injection of that life force fail to cause Su Zimo any harm, it even allowed the Green Lotus true body to recover completely and heal his injuries. Although the divine power storm had weakened significantly, there was still a tremendous amount of life force that continued to surge into the Green Lotus true body. Su Zimo's eyes were filled with ecstasy. If it was anyone else, the tremendous amount of life force left would have been enough to rupture their bodies and kill them on the spot. However, that life force was a rare opportunity for the Green Lotus true body. Su Zimo assumed a lotus position within the divine power storm and closed his eyes, absorbing and refining the tremendous life force within his body to cultivate. No one else could contain that life force. However, the Green Lotus true body could devour everything. As time passed by, Su Zimo's Green Lotus true body became purer and his essence spirit became more condensed as his cultivation realm rose slowly. Su Zimo had only just cultivated to the late-stage conjoint body realm after absorbing and refining the Ashoka wood. If he wanted to advance another minor realm and advance to the peak of the conjoint body realm, it would take him hundreds or even thousands of years of normal cultivation. It was a long way before his grade 7 Green Lotus true body could break through to grade 8. But now, by some freak coincidence, the divine power storm descended and allowed the Green Lotus true body to transform and grow rapidly. Far away, Extreme Fire, Nian Qi, Night Spirit and the others were finally relieved when they saw that. The three of them exchanged glances and could not help but laugh. There were tears in their smiles. This was the joy of surviving a calamity. Many Kunlun clansmen widened their eyes and looked at this scene in disbelief. Someone could actually survive the divine power storm? Night Spirit, Extreme Fire and the others did not go far and stayed nearby to rest and recuperate. On the one hand, they were worried about Su Zimo's safety. On the other hand, they were also worried that more god race beings would rush out from the Rainbow Cave. Thankfully, after the death of the Dragon Rider commander, gods Mainland seemed to have realized something and no longer entered Tianhuang Mainland. In the blink of an eye, an entire day had passed. Relying on his powerful regeneration capabilities, Night Spirit had already recovered significantly and was the first to stand up. Even if more god race beings barged in, he could kill them. The other Kunlun clansmen were way inferior compared to him. All of their faces were pale and filled with injuries as they tried their best to recuperate. Extreme Fire and Nian Qi's injuries had not healed but they had recovered quite a bit of stamina and could move freely. The one who changed the most was Su Zimo. In a day and night, the divine power storm had almost dissipated. However, Su Zimo's cultivation realm had broken through once more and he was already at the peak of the conjoint body realm. His grade 7 Green Lotus true body was also extremely close to grade 8. Of course, a breakthrough to grade 8 required consolidation over time or opportunities. Throughout history, the ancient Buddha Emperor was the only one who could nurture the creation Green Lotus to grade 8. Chapter 1531, Atonement. Chapter 1531, Atonement. Of course, the transformation Su Zimo underwent from the divine power storm was not merely on the surface. With the help of the divine power storm, Su Zimo truly sensed the power of divine powers. Of course, he could not comprehend divine powers within a single day and night. It was impossible to comprehend even a trace of divine power. However, such an experience in close contact with divine powers established a perfect foundation for his future comprehension of divine powers. Furthermore, after cultivating for an entire day and night, a realization rose in Su Zimo's heart as well. Initially, he thought that he was extremely lucky and possessed great fortune. That was the reason why a healing-type divine power storm was triggered by the Sword of Misfortune. If it was a killing-type divine power storm, he would have been torn into pieces by it right away and died. However, Su Zimo only gradually came to a realization when he sensed the power of the divine power. The creation green lotus possessed a divine power to begin with. However, he did not know if it was a lesser, greater or supreme divine power. No matter what divine power it was definitely a healing divine power. Therefore, although the Sword of Misfortune was the one that triggered the divine power Forbidden Region, the existence of the creation green lotus created a healing-type divine power storm. Everything was preordained. There was no opportunity that would come for him for no reason. Another 6 hours passed. The divine power storm dissipated completely. Su Zimo opened his eyes and rose. Sensing the immense power and exuberant life force in his body, he could not help but let out a long howl. The peak of the conjoined body realm. The peak of the grade 7 green lotus true body. If he had not arrived at the Kunlun ruins, Su Zimo would have to cultivate for countless years to reach this realm. Furthermore, with the baptism of the divine power storm on the green lotus true body, the killing badge power released by the blood vine race on him had long turned into nothingness. Congratulations, Zimo. Extreme Fire advanced and said with a smile. Su Zimo nodded. It was a blessing in disguise by chance. Although Extreme Fire's cultivation realm did not break through after the battle, his overall combat strength had increased significantly. This was the baptism of life and death. The baptism of blood. Not many people could experience such a huge battle in their cultivation path. There were even less people who could survive such a tragic battle. Every single person that survived would definitely have limitless accomplishments in the future. Experiences as such were the most precious treasures. Su Zimo looked around and felt that something was missing. Suddenly, he frowned and asked, "Where's Nian Qi?" I truly didn't notice her." Extreme Fire exclaimed softly. "Over there." A sharp-eyed Kunlun clansman pointed to the rainbow cave in midair and shouted. Su Zimo and the others turned around. Nian Qi was standing at the entrance of the rainbow cave and looking over. Her beautiful eyes were fixed on Su Zimo with deep reluctance and attachment. Under the sunlight, Su Zimo could clearly see 2 sparkling tears rolling down from the corner of Nian Qi's eyes. Su Zimo seemed to have realized something as he hurried forward and shouted, "Nian Qi, what are you doing? Come back." Nian Qi shook her head silently, but there was a resolute look in her eyes. "Nian Qi, what's wrong?" Extreme Fire shouted as well, "What's the matter? Come down and discuss things with us. Why are you over there? It's so dangerous." "Young master, I'm about to leave." A moment later, she said softly. Su Zimo frowned and said in a deep voice, "Nian Qi, if you still acknowledge me as your young master, come back immediately. Don't do anything foolish. I order you to return." Su Zimo's tone turned increasingly stern. He had never used such a tone to speak to Nian Qi before. Nian Qi had been by his side since a long time ago. Although she had always been a maidservant, he had never seen her as one. Su Zimo regarded Nian Qi as his kin and treated her like a younger sister. Nian Qi had never disobeyed his wishes as well. No matter what Su Zimo did or said, Nian Qi had no doubts and supported him without hesitation or resentment. "Young master, I'm sorry. Nian Qi pursed her lips and endured the tears in her eyes. She took a deep breath and said, I can't listen to you this time round. I'm going to leave. Su Zimo went silent. He knew that Nian Qi had already made up her mind and it would be useless no matter how he tried to persuade her. Leave? Where is that lass going? Extreme Fire was still puzzled and turned to ask Su Zimo. God's mainland. Su Zimo said slowly. Ah. Extreme Fire was shocked. He asked hurriedly, why is she going there? Although she has the bloodline of the god race, she knows nothing about God's mainland. Furthermore, if she heads over from Tianhuang mainland, she'll definitely be attacked by God's mainland. Moreover, she does not have a pure bloodline and only possesses half of their bloodline. There's no way God's mainland will welcome her. Su Zimo did not reply Extreme Fire. Others might not be able to understand, but he understood Nian Qi's intentions. Actually, when she saw the 8 paintings and knew the truth about the primordial war, Nian Qi was already behaving unusually. She was often distracted and slumped her head, not daring to meet Night Spirit's gaze. She had nothing to do with the primordial war. However, she felt guilty and reproachful because of it. Her guilt and self-blame had reached their limits after the battle yesterday. Nian Qi was an orphan child of the god race. It was only until she met Su Zimo that she found the feeling of kinship. However, she was still sensitive in the depths of her heart. Nian Qi did not know how she would face Night Spirit in the future. Although Night Spirit was not hostile towards her, he would definitely recall the blood feud of his parents each time he saw her. Nian Qi did not know how she was going to face Su Zimo in the future either. The truth of the primordial war would be revealed sooner or later. At that time, countless criticisms would definitely be attracted once it was known that Su Zimo's maidservant was a god race being. She was afraid of causing trouble for Su Zimo and losing him. More importantly, Nian Qi did not know how to face herself. She wanted to head to God's mainland. Even though her future was uncertain and it was extremely dangerous, she had to go. She wanted to face God's mainland alone. She wanted to do something for Su Zimo, Tianhuang mainland, and the countless living beings that died in the primordial war yesterday to atone for the god race's sins. Perhaps it was also a form of atonement for herself. Su Zimo and Nian Qi looked at one another from afar. Needless to say or explain, Su Zimo understood her intentions. Young master, you have to take good care of yourself when I'm not by your side from now on. Nian Qi said gently. All right. Su Zimo nodded. Young master, don't worry. I'll definitely return. Nian Qi paused for a moment and pondered briefly. If I don't return, you don't have to worry. Perhaps I might. If you don't return, I'll head over and look for you. Su Zimo interrupted Nian Qi and said firmly. Upon hearing that, tears gushed down the face of Nian Qi, who was staring at Su Zimo intently. Chapter 1532, Chaos in Tianhuang Mainland. Chapter 1532, Chaos in Tianhuang Mainland. Su Zimo knew that Nian Qi had made up her mind. No matter how he tried to stop her, he could not change her decision. Tianhuang Mainland was filled with internal strife and external troubles with impending calamity. More than that, he could not leave and follow Nian Qi to God's mainland. The only thing he could do was make a promise to her. Su Zimo's spirit consciousness moved and a gigantic sword not far away suddenly flew into his hands. It was one of the 4 divine weapons of the god race, the Sword of Misfortune. Swoosh! He flipped his hand and threw the Sword of Misfortune towards Nian Qi. Nian Qi received it instinctively. The gigantic sword was extremely heavy. Even with Nian Qi's divine power, her entire body sank slightly after she gripped the hilt. The Sword of Misfortune did not budge at all in Su Zimo's palm. However, in the palms of Nian Qi, the dark and cold aura began to emanate once more. Young master, this. Nian Qi was puzzled. Take that sword and head to God's mainland. Su Zimo said in a deep voice, that sword is useless in my hands. Only the bloodline of the god race can activate its power. Nian Qi pursed her lips without saying anything. She knew that the reason he gave was merely superficial. Even if Su Zimo could not activate the power of the Sword of Misfortune, it was still a rare divine weapon. The reason why Su Zimo asked her to bring the Sword of Misfortune to God's mainland was because it was a form of insurance for her. The two armies as well as many dragon riders of the god race that entered Tianhuang mainland were annihilated, leaving no survivors. Even their divine weapon was lost in Tianhuang mainland. Although Nian Qi was a remnant of the god race and had an impure bloodline, it would definitely be a meritorious deed for her if she brought the Sword of Misfortune back. The attitude of God's mainland towards her would change as well. At the very least, her life would not be in danger. That was Su Zimo's true intention. Thank you, young master. Nian Qi held the Sword of Misfortune with both hands and bowed in Su Zimo's direction. Thereafter, she turned and leaped into the rainbow cave, vanishing from sight. Su Zimo looked in that direction and remained silent for a long time. Sigh. Extreme Fire sighed and lamented, actually, there's no need for that lass to do that. She's way too sensitive internally. Let her be. Su Zimo said softly. Although he sounded carefree, he could not help but feel worried and disappointed at the thought that Nian Qi might not survive this trip and her future was uncertain. First, let's go. Night Spirit said. Su Zimo nodded and instructed, arrange for some men to watch over the god-slaying valley. If the god race has any strange movements, we can know right away. Actually, there was a high chance that things with the god race would be peaceful for a period of time after they experienced this crushing defeat. However, it was better to make preparations in case of unforeseen circumstances. Although Su Zimo had already removed the killing badge on his body, he was in no hurry to return to Tianhuang mainland. Instead, he stayed in the Kunlun ruins temporarily and continued cultivating. The Kunlun ruins had been stabilized and Night Spirit had become the new Kunlun Lord. There was nowhere safer and more suitable for cultivation than here. He had benefited way too much in this battle. The transformation of the Green Lotus true body, the perception of divine powers and the visual technique in the Nether glow stone required a long time to consolidate. Extreme Fire stayed in the Kunlun ruins as well. Spring came and autumn passed, time passed by quickly. Time seemed to pass faster during seclusion cultivation. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo had entered the Kunlun ruins for 100 years. 80 years ago, the god race invaded the Kunlun ruins and a huge battle broke out. However, in the past 80 years, the internal strife in the Kunlun ruins was resolved. Many Kunlun clansmen recuperated and became extremely peaceful while there was no longer any activity from the Rainbow Cave. However, Tianhuang mainland was in chaos. For the past 100 years, the activity of the primordial races increased. Among the primordial 9 races, apart from the dragon, Kuan and barbarian races, the other primordial 6 races walked out of the various forbidden grounds and expanded their territories wildly. For the past 100 years, countless sects and factions had been destroyed by the primordial races. Among them, 37 of the 108 upper sects were destroyed. That number was still increasing slowly. In such chaos, there were even more living beings that died in the 4 regions, 3 oceans, and 1 continent. The East Sea was dyed red for the longest time. The primordial 6 races, the Witch, Bloodvine, God, Golden Crow, Rakshasa and Heavenly Eye races, led by their young masters, attacked the sects and occupied territories. Everywhere they passed, a blood storm would break out. The combat strength of the primordial races was terrifying. Almost all the young masters had already cultivated to the half-martial Ancestor realm. Unless a patriarch appeared, no one could suppress the experts of the primordial races. As the primordial races did not bother the super sects of the cultivation world, major sects and factions such as the 9 immortal sects, 7 fiend sects and 6 Buddhist monasteries remained silent for 100 years. There was a mysterious balance between the super sects and the primordial six races. However, all the cultivators knew that such a situation would not last long. Finally, that balance was broken heartlessly after a massive battle in the south region. The forbidden ground of the Bloodvine race was in the south region and their territory was expanding continuously. It was inevitable that a huge battle would break out between them and Clear Wind Temple, one of the 9 immortal sects. 100 years ago, Tinglingzi was killed by Su Zimo. The Bloodvine race had long chosen a new young master. Under the lead of the young master of the Bloodvine race, the Bloodvine army attacked Clear Wind Temple and the battle lasted for an entire day. Countless cultivators of Clear Wind Temple died and were devoured by the Bloodvine race. Finally, patriarchs of Clear Wind Temple arrived. However, because of that, a patriarch of the Bloodvine race was alarmed. A single patriarch of the Bloodvine race killed more than 10 patriarchs of Clear Wind Temple without exception. The battle escalated. The Emperor of Clear Wind Temple appeared and killed the patriarch of the Bloodvine race. However, later on, the Blood Emperor of the Bloodvine race descended and killed the Emperor of Clear Wind Temple on the Sex Mountain Peak within 3 rounds. In the end, the Mystic Emperor was the one who stood out and fought against the Blood Emperor. It was a stalemate and the former managed to forcibly rescue some cultivators of Clear Wind Temple to retreat to Enigma Palace. However, after that battle, Clear Wind Temple, one of the 9 immortal sects, was destroyed as well. After that battle, the Bloodvine even made threats. If human emperors dared to show their faces again to interfere in the fights on Tianhuang Mainland, the Blood Emperor would appear and kill them all. It was a blatant threat. Furthermore, it threatened all the emperors of the human race. The cultivation world remained silent. No emperor replied. None of the emperors were confident when the Emperor of Clear Wind Temple died in less than 3 rounds against the Blood Emperor. What was even more frightening was that many emperors knew that the Blood Emperor was the weakest emperor among the emperors of the primordial 6 races in this generation. Furthermore, the Bloodvine race had more than one emperor. Before long, the Golden Crow race stepped foot into the East region. One of the 6 Buddhist monasteries of the East region, Clear Heart Nunnery, was the first to be destroyed. In that battle, none of the Mahayana patriarchs of Clear Heart Nunnery appeared. That was because the Mahayana patriarchs of Clear Heart Nunnery knew that even if they appeared, they could not save Clear Heart Nunnery from its destruction. If they appeared, they would die just like the patriarchs of Clear Wind Temple. The advanced ancient battlefield was a world of its own and the primordial races could not enter. At the very least, they were safe as long as they stayed within the advanced ancient battlefield. In just half a day, Clear Heart Nunnery was reduced to ruins. It was already too late by the time patriarchs of Enigma Palace arrived. Chapter 1533, 10,000 Race Meet. Chapter 1533, 10,000 Race Meet. Enigma Palace. Old man, what should we do? Lin Xuanji had a worried expression and was uncharacteristically stern. Clear Wind Temple and Clear Heart Nunnery have been destroyed and the calamity of the human race has arrived. If we don't retaliate, the immortal sects, fiend sects, and Buddhist monasteries will be destroyed by the primordial 6 races one after another. At that time, humans will most likely return to the primordial era where they were enslaved by the 10,000 races. The storyteller stood on a Dao palace and gazed into the distance in silence. I heard that there seems to have been a few major battles in the demon regions as well. Some of them have already submitted to the primordial 6 races. Lin Xuanji continued, as time passes, the strength of the primordial 6 races will only increase. How should we defend then? The storyteller was silent for a moment before saying suddenly, there's news that Enigma Palace is about to hold a 10,000 race meet and invite the primordial races and major sects to a discussion. Lin Xuanji shuddered. The storyteller continued, we can take a step back. Since the primordial 6 races want territory, we'll give it to them. We'll try our best to buy time so that this battle won't break out right away. Lin Xuanji frowned. The primordial races are in their prime right now. How can they sit down and negotiate with us normally? At that time, the primordial races will definitely demand an unreasonable demand. There's a high chance that this 10,000 race meet will collapse. Even if the negotiation falls, the situation won't get worse. The storyteller said, in the ancient battlefield, I've been summoning the emperors of the human race to defend against the primordial 6 races together. However, there weren't many emperors that responded. Even if the emperors of the world are gathered, we might not be able to fight against the primordial 6 races, let alone the few of us. The storyteller laughed self-deprecatingly. I'm not the human emperor after all. I don't have his prestige. In the ancient era, nobody dared to disobey the human emperor's orders. However, Ancestor human emperor has long ascended to the upper world, sigh. Lin Xuanji sighed gently. The storyteller smiled. Go on and pass the order. All right. Lin Xuanji nodded heavily and turned to leave. The storyteller raised his head and looked at the firmaments, murmuring softly, Ancestor human emperor, please bless the human race to tide through this calamity. The destruction of Clear Heart Nunnery shook the entire cultivation world. Before long, an even more shocking piece of news spread from Enigma Palace through the entire Tianhuang mainland rapidly, causing a commotion. Enigma Palace was going to host the 10,000 race meet. The 10,000 races had always existed. However, after the primordial war, the 10,000 races withered and many were destroyed. The remaining races fused together and were known collectively as the demon race. However, Enigma Palace had caused such a huge commotion this time round. Enigma Palace was a sacred ground for the human race and was the most mysterious. Even among the primordial races, Enigma Palace had an extremely high status. After all, it was founded by Fairy Ling Long in the past. As for Fairy Ling Long, she was the wife of the human emperor. Naturally, none of the sects and factions would reject upon hearing the news. The destruction of Clear Wind Temple and Clear Heart Nunnery caused the cultivators of the super sects to shudder in fear. Now that Enigma Palace was taking the initiative to lead, they might be able to resolve the conflict if they could negotiate with the primordial 6 races. The super sects were the first to respond. The forbidden ground of the god race. 6 figures with terrifying auras sat in the palace and exuded the might of emperors. The void around them trembled and distorted. Enigma Palace of the human race has actually made such a move. Interesting. The person who spoke had a vertical eye on his glabella. It was the emperor of this generation's Heavenly Eye race, the Heavenly Eye Emperor. The Blood Emperor sneered, the ants of the human race are already afraid. That's the reason why they want to hold the 10,000 race meet. Why should we bother? There's no harm in letting the juniors take a look. The God Emperor smiled gently. No one can threaten them except for human patriarchs. We can just let them handle this matter. Furthermore, a few super sects of the human race have already sought us out and chose to submit, Fufu. Another emperor burning with golden flames nodded slightly. We have to deal with the human race as soon as possible. Thereafter, we have to join forces to deal with the dragon race. We can't let that dragon phoenix grow. Don't worry, it's only been so many years. That dragon phoenix is far from being capable. After the news of Enigma Palace spread, the primordial 6 races agreed that they would arrive at Enigma Palace 10 days later. Immediately after, the 8 demon regions agreed to it as well. The entire world was shaken. Almost all the sects, factions and thousands of races of Tianhuang mainland would be gathered at this 10,000 race meet. It was definitely an unprecedented event. Pingyang Town. The Martial Dao Prime Body who was in seclusion in his room sensed something and opened his eyes from the darkness. In a flash, he floated down from his bed and pushed the door open. Before long, a graceful figure appeared in the skies of Pingyang Town. The woman was extremely beautiful and had a slender figure. She stood in midair and looked at the Martial Dao Prime Body below with a conflicted expression. That woman was Rakshasa Yu who had rushed over from Ethereal Peak. Is there anything? The martial Dao Prime Body asked indifferently. Rakshasa Yu recounted the news of the 10,000 race meet. Oh. The martial Dao Prime Body replied casually. Rakshasa Yu clenched her fists slightly. Desolate Marshal, the human race has already begun to bow down. After the 10,000 race meet, the situation in Tianhuang Mainland will definitely change and the human race will once again be reduced to the bottom of the 10,000 races. No matter how much of a monster incarnate you are and how invincible you are among your peers, you won't be able to defend against patriarchs and emperors. You can't save the human race alone. The martial Dao Prime Body was unmoved and asked with an unchanged expression, so? Therefore, I can give you a chance. Rakshasa Yu said, I don't need you to submit to me. As long as you're willing to join the Rakshasa race, I can make the decision so that the Rakshasa race won't harm your life or anyone related to you. The martial Dao Prime Body smiled mockingly. Go back, you don't have to guard Ethereal Peak anymore. However, you have to remember not to reveal anything about me. No one would target Ethereal Peak now that the 10,000 race meet was on. It was useless to have Rakshasa Yu continue guarding Ethereal Peak. With that said, the martial Dao Prime Body turned to return to his room. You! Rakshasa Yu gripped her fists with a furious expression. Over the years, she had attempted to challenge the martial Dao Prime Body. However, each time she issued a challenge after she had a breakthrough or her combat strength increased, she would be suppressed extremely tragically. 20 years ago, she had already broken through and became a half-martial ancestor. She came to challenge the martial Dao Prime Body with confidence but was still suppressed mercilessly. Rakshasa Yu had a conflicted feeling towards the martial Dao Prime Body. In the depths of her heart, she could not even bring herself to hate the martial Dao Prime Body. When she knew that the primordial 6 races had begun attacking the major sects and factions, her first thought was to use her identity to protect the martial Dao Prime Body. He truly took my goodwill for granted. Rakshasa Yu cursed angrily, I want to see how you're going to come and beg me after the 10,000 race meet. Chapter 1534, Return to Beiming. Chapter 1534, Return to Beiming. 10,000 race meet. After returning to the room, the martial Dao Prime Body murmured. Young master, can the human race tide through this crisis? Tao Yao also realized that the human race was in an extremely difficult situation. I don't know. The martial Dao Prime Body shook his head gently. However, it's time to check out Beiming. If it was only the major sects and factions of the human race, they would not be able to go against the primordial 6 races in this 10,000 race meet. Be it in terms of strength or aura, they were way too inferior. This time round, the other 3 primordial races had to express their stance as well. It was easy to settle the dragon race because he had the dragon phoenix true body after all. At that moment, the dragon phoenix true body had already received the news in the ancestral dragon ground. The only thing he had to do was obtain the support of the Kuan and barbarian race. The martial Dao Prime Body knew nothing about the barbarian race. However, he made a move towards the Kuan race more than 100 years ago. It was a move that would either bring about unimaginable blessings or disasters. That was no ordinary bloodline or demon beast, it was the taboo Kuan Peng. All 3 taboos were decisive to kill. If the Kuan Peng grew and did not acknowledge him as its master, he would not obtain any support even if he headed to Beiming. There was also a chance that he might encounter danger. However, the martial Dao Prime Body did not hesitate and headed for Beiming. At the same time, he notified the Green Lotus True Body who was still cultivating in the Kunlun ruins and told the Green Lotus True Body about the news of the past few years in Tianhuang Mainland as well as the 10,000 race meet. 7 days later, a figure appeared on the extreme north glaciers. Even in the ice and snow, the figure's footsteps could not be affected. It was as though a gigantic furnace was burning in the body of the martial Dao Prime Body and his blood chi was exuberant. Before long, a dark ocean appeared in front of the martial Dao Prime Body. In the extreme north, this was the only ocean without any signs of freezing. This was the forbidden ground of the Kuan race, Beiming. The martial Dao prime body stood at the edge of Beiming and looked at the deep ocean beneath, emitting a spirit consciousness fluctuation as he shouted. Carefree. That voice was enough to spread through Beiming. He believed that Carefree would definitely hear it. The martial Dao prime body stood at the edge of Beiming and waited silently. Even he did not know if he would be welcomed or killed later on. Before long, the martial Dao prime body narrowed his eyes. He could clearly sense an extremely terrifying aura speeding towards the surface of the sea. Before long, a figure broke through the water surface silently and rose slowly. It was a woman with long silver hair. She had a cold expression and looked like a heroine as she glared at the martial Dao prime body with an unfriendly expression. Although the woman looked young, her aura was extremely terrifying and had already surpassed the conjoint body realm. Mahayana realm. A matriarch of the Kuan race. The martial Dao prime body's expression was unchanged as he narrowed his eyes and was prepared to leave. Given his current combat strength, he still had no chance of winning against a Mahayana matriarch. Swoosh. Right then, the sound of water could be heard from the surface of the sea. A muscular figure broke out of the water and somersaulted in midair. Arriving beside Su Zimo, he knelt down. Greetings, Master. It was a young man who looked to be around 16 years old. He was handsome, unusually agile, and had huge eyes that were watery. Carefree? The martial Dao prime body was slightly stunned. After all, when he brought Carefree to Beiming, the latter was merely a gigantic egg. The martial Dao prime body did not know what Carefree looked like now that he had grown up. After not seeing him for 100 years, Carefree's cultivation had advanced to the Dharma characteristic realm. That's me. Laughing for a moment, Carefree turned to look at the silver-haired woman in midair. Sister, this is my master. Don't give that rude expression. Humph. Even after hearing Carefree's words, the silver-haired woman did not have a good expression as she harumphed coldly. If not for the fact that you brought Carefree back, you would have been a dead man by now. The martial Dao prime body smiled and did not argue. Right now, he had no chance of winning against a Mahayana matriarch. However, it was also impossible for a Mahayana matriarch to kill him as well. Master, ignore her. Carefree pouted his lips and said excitedly, Master, you haven't looked for me for a long time and I'm dying of boredom stuck in this place. When are you taking me out to play? There's an extremely lively event that will be held in a few days, you can go check it out. The martial Dao prime body smiled gently. For real? Carefree's eyes lit up. What are you trying to do? The silver-haired woman asked coldly with an unfriendly tone. The martial Dao prime body did not hide anything and said in a deep voice, I want the Kuan race to take part in the 10,000 race meet. Furthermore, I want you guys to stand on the side of the human race. Foo-foo. The silver-haired woman sneered, on what basis? The fact that you're a conjoint body mighty figure? The martial Dao prime body shook his head. If the Kuan race ignores the safety of the human race and stands by the sidelines, the primordial 6 races will definitely turn around and deal with you guys after they're done with the human race. The primordial 6 races will definitely not let a taboo grow. You know very well about the stakes, there's no need for me to elaborate. The silver-haired woman went silent. Sister, I want to go. Carefree replied hurriedly. The silver-haired woman glared at Carefree and turned to ask, from what I know, the dragon race has a taboo as well. That's right. The martial Dao prime body nodded. The taboo of the dragon race is my clone. The dragon race will participate in this 10,000 race meet as well. My dragon phoenix true body will head to Enigma Palace personally. When she heard that, the silver-haired woman's heart skipped a beat. That statement carried a message. The dragon race would definitely stand on the side of the human race. I'll go back and discuss it. You can leave. The silver-haired woman was silent for a long time before saying. She turned to look at Carefree. Let's go back. Master. Carefree looked at the martial Dao prime body aggrievedly. Go on. The martial Dao prime body nodded and turned to leave without lingering. East Region, Great Boulder Forest. This was one of the 9 forbidden grounds of Tianhuang Mainland, and no living being dared to step foot into it. However, this day, a group of cultivators arrived outside the Great Boulder Forest. Their leader had shoulder-length scarlet hair and wore scarlet armor. Although he had refined features, he exuded an extremely violent aura. The Dragon Phoenix true body had descended. Behind the Dragon Phoenix true body was a group of dragons, all of them the strongest paragons and monster incarnates of the younger generation. Long Tsang, the 5-clawed divine dragon, as well as Long Shi of the hornless dragon lineage. Solitary Cloud, who had now joined the Illumination dragon lineage, was included as well. The reason why the Dragon Phoenix true body arrived at the Great Boulder Forest of the East Region personally was to invite the barbarian race out of seclusion. I'm Long Mo, and I'm here to meet fellow Taoists of the barbarian race. Please grant me an audience. The voice of the Dragon Phoenix true body was neither loud nor soft, but it spread to every corner of the Great Boulder Forest. Before long, a loud bang sounded from the Great Boulder Forest. Countless boulders swayed and a passageway opened up. A group of extremely tall and strong figures walked out from the depths of the boulders with a repressing aura. Chapter 1535, Firmament Sovereign. Chapter 1535, Firmament Sovereign. The barbarian race was extremely tall. Every single barbarian was more than 30 feet tall and had beast skins wrapped around their waists, revealing their upper bodies. Their bodies were filled with fur and their limbs were thick. Their skin was coarse and they looked like uncivilized wild men that consumed meat and drank blood. The dragon race was already slightly taller than ordinary humans. However, in front of the barbarian race, they were only at the latter's knees. Compared to the barbarian race, the Dragon Phoenix true body looked short. However, in terms of aura, he surpassed many of the barbarian race. The barbarian race felt a bloodline suppression from the Dragon Phoenix true body. You're the young master of the dragon race, Long Mo. The leading barbarian was at the conjoint body realm. When he arrived before the many dragons, he lowered his head slightly and glared at the Dragon Phoenix true body at the front, asking in a deep voice. Yes. The Dragon Phoenix true body nodded. I'm Man Feng, a personal guard of the young master. Fellow Taoists of the dragon race, please follow me. After saying that, he turned and led the way into the Great Boulder Forest. The barbarian race was massive and the ground trembled as they walked through the forest. The Dragon Phoenix true body had a calm expression as he followed Man Feng towards the barbarian habitat. However, Long Tsang, Long Shi and the other dragons did not look good. The young master of the barbarian race sure is cocky. Long Tsang smiled gently and said sarcastically, he only sent a personal guard to receive our young master of the dragon race personally? In the hearts of Long Tsang and the others, it was only appropriate for young masters of the primordial races to welcome one another personally should any of them pay a personal visit. Furthermore, the Dragon Phoenix true body was a taboo. It would even be normal for Ancestor realm experts of the barbarian race to receive him personally. To think that the barbarian race merely sent some conjoint body realm barbarians and a personal guard of their young master. Master, the attitude of the barbarian race doesn't seem too good. Solitary Cloud sent a voice transmission to the Dragon Phoenix true body. Let's wait and see. The Dragon Phoenix true body's expression was unchanged. When Man Feng heard Long Tsang's mockery, he was not enraged and chuckled foolishly. I'm truly sorry. Coincidentally, the barbarian race has some visitors today and our young master is receiving them, so he truly can't leave. Oh. The Dragon Phoenix true body's heart skipped a beat as he pondered. Those who could enter the forbidden grounds of the barbarian race and be received by the young master were definitely from the primordial 9 races. However, he did not know which primordial race was here. I wonder which primordial race is here. Long Tsang deduced the same point and asked. Fellow Taoists of the dragon race, you will know in a while. Man Feng said, the young master is in the barbarian palace and will receive all of you together. Long Tsang and the others exchanged glances. Needless to think, the reason why the primordial race came was to rope in the barbarian race as well. All these years, the barbarian race had been neutral towards the conquest of Tianhuang mainland, the conflicts with the human race and the killing of taboos. This made both parties want to rope in the barbarian race. If the dragon race could think of that, the primordial 6 races could as well. The dragon race was not confident to begin with when they came to rope in the barbarian race. Now that another primordial race has arrived, it made the trip for the dragon race even more difficult. Man Feng led Su Zimo and the others forward. After passing through a series of boulders, the boulders swayed and intersected once more. The dragon phoenix true body turned back. The landing points of the boulders were rather particular and formed a unique and mysterious formation. If not for the lead of the barbarian race, there was a high chance that they would have fallen into the trap if they had barged in without permission. Before long, a massive and ancient palace appeared before everyone. The palace was made from gigantic boulders and was a few thousand feet tall. There were no doors or windows decorations and the design was simple and savage, exuding the aura of the primordial era. Every single gigantic boulder was filled with bumps and hollows, leaving behind countless divine weapons and signs of the flames of war. 2 massive words were written on a gigantic boulder on top of the palace, Barbarian Palace. Before everyone arrived at the Barbarian Palace, they could hear hearty laughter echoing from within, as though both parties were in a good mood. Long Tsang and the others' hearts sank. The situation did not seem good now that the other party had arrived first and established the advantage. Long Tsang and the others looked at the dragon phoenix true body instinctively with inquiring expressions. The dragon phoenix true body was expressionless and continued following Man Feng towards the barbarian palace. When they arrived at the entrance of the hall, they could see that there were quite a number of people sitting in the palace. It was bustling with everyone drinking and chatting merrily. A tall barbarian sat on a high seat in the middle. From the looks of it, this was the young master of the barbarian race, Man Hu. On his right, a handsome man sat on the ground and toasted him with a smile on his face. The man had golden hair, blue eyes, and wore a faint golden robe. His blood qi was strong and every single move he made exuded a noble aura. The God Race. The cultivation of the God Race man was at the half-martial Ancestor realm. Of course, during the years of cultivation in the ancestral dragon ground, the cultivation of the dragon phoenix true body advanced as well and was at the half-martial Ancestor realm. How strong! Long Shi's heart skipped a beat when she saw the God Race man. The God Race man gave her an extremely dangerous feeling. Even Long Tsang had a grim expression as he frowned and sent a voice transmission to Su Zimo. This is one of the most famous monster incarnates of the God Race right now. He's the young master of the God Race, the Firmament Sovereign. There were 2 monster incarnates in this generation of the God Race. The Firmament Sovereign and Goddess Xiaoxiang. For the past 100 years, these 2 monster incarnates only attacked thrice, but 3 upper sects of the cultivation world were destroyed right away, shaking the entire Tianhuang mainland. It was said in the cultivation world that the Firmament Sovereign and Goddess Xiaoxiang were the 2 strongest monster incarnates of the God Race in tens of thousands of years. Furthermore, the 2 of them were Tao companions and could be considered as a true golden couple. Behind the Firmament Sovereign stood 2 conjoint body God Race beings with their hands behind their backs. From the looks of it, those should be servants of the Firmament Sovereign. Just as the dragon phoenix true body entered the barbarian palace, the Firmament Sovereign put down his cup and turned around slightly, looking over with a fake smile. A killing intent flashed through the depths of his eyes as he sized up the dragon phoenix true body. However, the gaze of the dragon phoenix true body had already shifted to the 3 people behind the 2 servants. Among the 3 God Race beings, there was an old man, an old lady and a middle-aged man. Although their cultivation realms were not obvious, they exuded an extremely terrifying aura. The dragon phoenix true body narrowed his eyes slightly. Everyone, watch out. Those might be ancestor gods. Long Tsang suddenly sent a voice transmission with a grim tone. Ancestor realm beings of the god race. They were not half-martial ancestors. They were true patriarchs and matriarchs. Sensing the gaze of the dragon phoenix true body, the three ancestor gods looked over at the same time. Their gazes met in midair and sparks seemed to fly. The atmosphere in the barbarian palace turned heavy instantly. Earlier on, the main hall was bustling with people pushing their wine glasses. In the blink of an eye, it was dead silent, such that one could hear a pin drop. Chapter 1536, A Huge Gift. Chapter 1536, A Huge Gift. Ha 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 ha. Right then, a hearty laughter sounded from the hall in a robust manner, causing the entire hall to tremble. The young master of the barbarian race stood up and cupped his fists towards the dragon phoenix true body. Brother Long Mo, pardon me for not welcoming you from afar. Brother Long Mo, please take your seat. The young master of the barbarian race looked friendly and sincere, as though he was not scheming at all. Coupled with such a strong and muscular body, it was easy to give off the impression that he had strong limbs and a simple mind. However, the dragon phoenix true body knew better than that. Nobody who could become the young master of a race was a fool. It was clear that the young master of the barbarian race wanted him to meet everyone from the god race and gather at the barbarian palace intentionally. His final goal might be to obtain the greatest benefits for the barbarian race. What should we do? From the looks of it, the god race is bent on winning the barbarian race over. Furthermore, the god race has 3 ancestor gods. Long Shi was worried and asked with a spirit consciousness voice transmission, Young Master, you have a noble status. Why don't we return to the Dragon Bone Valley immediately? No, we can't. Long Tsang shook his head gently and sent a voice transmission, this is the territory of the barbarian race and they are the masters. The god race won't dare to attack anyone. Furthermore, there are 2 patriarchs of the barbarian race guarding behind Manhu as well. If the 3 ancestor gods dare to make a move, the patriarchs of the barbarian race will definitely interfere. Solitary Cloud nodded as well. Agreed. Right now, it's safest to stay with the barbarian race. If we were to leave rashly and the god race were to do so thereafter, we'll be in danger instead. The 3 of them discussed with voice transmissions. Naturally, the 3 of them included the dragon phoenix true body in their spirit consciousness voice transmissions. However, the dragon phoenix true body was silent and expressionless the entire time. The 3 of them did not know what was on his mind. Under the gazes of many people and the intense hostility of the god race, the dragon phoenix true body was indifferent and was the first to step into the barbarian palace, standing in the middle. You're Long Mo. The Firmament Sovereign stood up slowly and said with a bright gaze, I've truly heard a lot about you. The dragon phoenix true body did not even look at the Firmament Sovereign. He merely stood in the middle of the hall and looked at the young master of the barbarian race before getting straight to the point. Let's not waste time. I'm here because I want the support of the barbarian race. In the 10,000 race meet, I hope that the barbarian race will join the dragon race to stand on the side of the human race against the primordial 6 races. Pfturo. A snicker came from the side. The Firmament Sovereign had a mocking expression and looked at the dragon phoenix true body with disdain. Initially, he thought that Long Mo was a powerful figure as one of the 3 great taboos. To think that he would be so impatient. Foo-foo. The 2 god race mighty figures behind the Firmament Sovereign roared in laughter as well. The Firmament Sovereign said leisurely, I've long heard that the so-called taboo dragon phoenix is merely a clone of the human Desolate martial. Initially, I didn't believe it. Now that I've seen it for myself, I know that the rumors are true. The Firmament Sovereign looked at Long Tsang and the others. You guys acknowledged a human clone as your young master. Aren't you afraid that he'll drag the dragon race into the endless abyss? The status of the young master of the dragon race isn't something an outsider like you can comment on. Long Song harumphed coldly in an unfriendly tone. Audacious. The god race mighty figure hollered, "There's no room for a lackey to butt in when my young master is speaking." Long Song's expression darkened and his gaze was cold. Although he was not the young master of the dragon race, he was a five-clawed divine dragon with a noble bloodline. If not for the birth of the taboo, he would have been the young master of the dragon race. Although he was only at the conjoint body realm while the Firmament sovereign was a half-martial ancestor, he would definitely dare to challenge the latter anytime. Apart from the dragon phoenix true body, he had never been scolded like this before. Haha. Right then, the young master of the barbarian race laughed and eased the tension in the hall. Brother Long Mo, I like your character. You're truly straightforward and don't beat around the bush. However, he changed the topic. There's no hurry. Brother Long Mo, please take your seat. We'll discuss as we drink. The dragon phoenix true body was still motionless as he asked, in that case, the barbarian race has yet to make a decision? The young master of the barbarian race smiled. This matter is extremely important. The decision will impact the fate of the barbarian race as well as our future. I've got to be careful. Suddenly, Man Phone, the personal guard of the young master of the barbarian race, asked, "Did the dragon race bring any gifts for this trip?" Gifts? The dragons were slightly stunned. Long Song, Long Shi and the others exchanged glances with awkward expressions. The reason why they came this time round was purely to explain their stakes to the barbarian race and make use of the reputation of the taboo to rope in the barbarian race. They had truly not thought of bringing any gifts. Fufu. The Firmament sovereign smiled leisurely. Why? Fellow Taoists of the dragon race, are you here empty-handed? Long Song and the others had ugly expressions and remained silent. The dragon phoenix true body's expression was still unchanged. The young master of the barbarian race had been paying attention to the expression of the dragon phoenix true body the entire time. However, after some observation, he could not read the latter's mind at all. It was unfathomable. This was the evaluation of the young master of the barbarian race towards the dragon phoenix true body. The young master of the barbarian race chuckled and tried to smooth things over. It's fine, anyone who comes are guests. There's no need for gifts. We're all part of the primordial races, there's no need to stand on courtesy. Even so, aren't they looking down on the barbarian race by coming over empty-handed to invite you guys out of seclusion? The Firmament sovereign did not give up on the chance to attack the dragon race at all. I'm here with a huge gift. That's the only way to express the sincerity of the god race. With that said, he took out a storage bag and his spirit consciousness moved. The items in the storage bag scattered on the ground and burst forth with divine lights. There were weapons, elixirs and materials among them. In fact, there were even some cultivation techniques and secret skills. Is that the Ancestor sand? The young master of the barbarian race glared at a handful of gravel on the ground and asked sternly with a glint in his eyes. That's right. The Firmament sovereign said proudly, I long knew that the Ancestor sand is extremely useful for the barbarian race in tempering their bodies. I only obtained this by chance in a primordial ruin and brought it here for you, brother man who. Ha 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 ha. The young master of the barbarian race burst into laughter and could not conceal the excitement on his face. You're way too kind, brother Firmament sovereign. Young master, what should we do? Long Song frowned slightly and asked with a voice transmission, we were completely unprepared and now we're outmatched by this Firmament sovereign. By the looks of it, the barbarian race is probably going to join forces with the god race. Suddenly, the dragon phoenix true body said, actually, I've also prepared a huge gift for the barbarian race. Oh? What sort of a huge gift is it? Man who revealed an interested expression. That was what he wanted to see the most. The barbarian race would only benefit if the two races competed against one another. This gift is very precious. I believe that the barbarian race will definitely like it. The Dragon Phoenix True Body smiled as well and said meaningfully. The young master of the barbarian race was even more curious and could not help but stand up. Brother Long Mo, even I'm looking forward to it given the way you're saying it now. Long Sung and the others revealed lost expressions. Even they did not know what gift the Dragon Phoenix True Body had prepared. The Firmament Sovereign revealed a disdainful expression and sneered, "Stop putting on a mysterious act. What sort of a huge gift did you bring? Hurry and show it to everyone." "Sure thing." The Dragon Phoenix True Body turned around and looked at the Firmament Sovereign. "The gift I've prepared is your head." You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.